Nestled in a classic New England setting amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the July 29, 2013 meeting of the Falmouth Board of Selectmen. I invite you all to rise and join the board as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A few procedural announcements before we begin our agenda this evening. If you have a cell phone or some other device which randomly can create noise, we ask that you silence it or turn it off. If you choose to speak this evening, and there will be opportunities for public comment and public testimony, please wait to be recognized by the chair. When you are recognized, please come to the lectern and identify yourself for the record. We may know who you are, but the folks at home or the recording secretary may not. And please direct all your comments through the chair. If you choose to stay in the room with us for the duration of the meeting, please refrain from any side conversations or comments. It can distract the proceedings, and if you choose to leave early, please do so quietly, because obviously if you're leaving early, we still are here to do business. There is a speaker's policy, and a copy of which is at the lectern. If you would like to record the meeting audio, we ask only that you identify yourselves. If you choose to record the meeting with video, you will require the permission of the board. So at this time, is there anyone who is recording the meeting through audio or video? All right then. And with that, we'll go to the first item on our agenda, or the second, as the case would be, the announcements and proclamations. And we will announce the November 2013 annual town meeting. And we are announcing the meeting this evening. The warrant for the November 2013 annual town meeting will close on Friday, September 6, 2013. The board will vote the articles and execute the warrant on Monday, September 16. The articles will be published on Friday, September 20. The board will vote recommendations for the articles on Monday, October 7, and the warrant will be published with those recommendations on Friday, October 25th. Town meeting is Tuesday, November 12. It's the day after Veterans Day this year. We do have one other announcement from the general public. There's an organization, you all have heard the situation with the Nimrod and the potential demolition of the structure. There is an organization that is trying to save the Nimrod. And Mr. Hampson, would you like to say a few things?
I'll be brief and to the point, and I want to thank you for having me here. It means a lot. I'm here tonight to tell you that there is a committee formed. People have said there's committees formed. There's one large committee. And the thing that's interesting about it, and I think you'll be pleased about this, there are people who are pro-wind and anti-wind working together. And I think that's a very positive step. So the Brits missed taking over our town in 1812, and that's the rendition right there. But what we're going through is, after this battle, we're embarking on a new battle, or challenge, if you will, with our town, and it's from a possible demolition of the Nimrod, which we need to address. And that's why I'm here tonight. We intend to do this in a civil manner. We're not going to get anywhere if we have an argument. We're going to be in a whirlwind, and we're probably going to lose the Nimrod. So I want to make that point very clear. If I have anything to do this, I'm going to push for that on this committee, that we cannot antagonize the new owner, whoever that might be, and I will not say anything about the owner tonight, who it might be, or the price, or any of that. All I want to do with you tonight is I want to get your combined support of what we're doing, because we're going to have to need it. And if we ever lose the Nimrod, believe me, we might as well walk over the bridge and keep on going, because it's going to, a lot of people are going to be really upset about this, and it doesn't have to happen. We hope to be creative and solve the problem. So we have an on-site website. It's www.savethenimrod.org. And I'm going to present you with a couple of things to remind you of that. Okay? So that's all I have to say. And again, please support us. And I don't want 3 members. I want a unanimous support, because we're going to have to work our tails off. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, George. Are there any further announcements from the board or the town manager's office? Okay. With that, then? Thank you. Thank you very much.
I might say one thing, if I could. Last Saturday was the funeral and burial services for Mary Lou Smith, and some of you may remember Mary Lou. She edited the Book of Falmouth, which we all, I'm sure, have a copy of on our living room tables. She was the president of this Historical Society, the Historical Commission, for many years. She was absolutely instrumental in saving Highfield. And all I could think of was that if she had it in her, and if it were possible, she would be here today, because, George, she would be right on the doorstep working with you to save the Nimrod, because that's what she did. And I think that Falmouth, a lot of the historic preservation in Falmouth today is really because of the efforts of Mary Lou and those that she worked with. I know Ahmed is here, and he remembers Mary Lou very well. So we lost a great champion for historic preservation, but there's a lot here that, and Anne, we obviously worked with Mary Lou as well. But there's a lot here in Falmouth that will keep her memory alive for many years to come. So keep up the good work.
All right. Any other announcements? Okay. Next item on our agenda is a wetland hearing. Dredging at 65 Falmouth Heights Road nominee, or for the 65 Falmouth Heights Road nominee trust. Falmouth Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing under Section 240-77, the wetland regulations of the zoning bylaws of the town of Falmouth, this evening, July 29, 2013, 7 p.m. in the Selectmen's meeting room, Town Hall, on the application of Falmouth Heights Road nominee trust, Anastasios Parafestis, trustee. The proposed project includes maintenance and improvement dredging of approximately 300 cubic yards of material to provide improved navigational access to the existing licensed timber bulkhead within Falmouth Inner Harbor at 65 Falmouth Heights Road. The applicant's representative, I presume.
Good evening. My name's Michael McGrath. I'm a registered engineer and professional land surveyor, and my firm, Holmes & McGrath, prepared the plans and the applications. This is the site of the Island Queen. This is the end of Falmouth Inner Harbor. And so this is the land. There is a series of small finger piers, and this has shoaled in. And so the proposal is to dredge it to 10 feet below mean low water. There'll be a small triangular wedge of material left up against the bulkhead. The bulkhead is sized to so that there's not greater than 8 feet of water. So there's 300 cubic yards here, and so that's what we applied for a special permit. We have an order of conditions from the Falmouth Conservation Commission, and we also have what's called a water quality we've been given an indication that a water quality certificate will be issued, but I haven't seen it. So under the provisions of the zoning bylaw, we have to come to you because this affects the wetland resources of the town. But I believe that since we have an order and we have sign off from various agencies, that this is an appropriate activity for Falmouth Inner Harbor. Are there any questions I can answer?
Mr. Murphy?
Falmouth Harbor, of course, is a very busy harbor in the summer months. When is the proposed dredging operation going to be undertaken?
The order of conditions limits the time of the dredging because of a requirement to offset winter flounder. So it has to be done either in the fall or the early spring.
So it would not be done in the summer months?
No, no.
Okay, that's...
If I may, I think there's a condition there from
I just
January
wanted folks to
31st to March.
Great, thank you.
And that's because of the flounder.
Right. I just wanted the folks out there to know that there won't be any disruption in Falmouth Harbor during the summer months.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Is there a specific reason for the project beyond just general dredging?
They have begun to notice adverse consequences. We think that there's constant movement of sand caused by some of the vessels out there. So they're beginning to see that there's not as much depth as there used to be, so this would be called maintenance dredging.
I just noticed a few things on the application, and I just need some clarification. The one about the order of conditions is pending, and I think possibly from the amount of time that you've had with the application, I didn't know if do you have any reason in your experience why that's still pending? First, I'm looking at the order of conditions, DEP file 25. And the other one is the Army Corps application is pending, and the water quality.
What actually happens is in Massachusetts, I need an order of conditions to come to you, I need an order of conditions to apply for the Corps of Engineers, and I need an order of conditions to apply for the waterways license. So the order of conditions is the most important application, and we did file, and they did vote a to issue an order of conditions approving the project. We went to the water quality certificate issue because we wanted to make sure that the material that was going to be dredged out of the bottom was suitable for beach nourishment.
Yeah.
Normally, you would think that there would be pollutants in this sediment, but it was tested twice and we didn't find any pollutants. It was all sand. That's the reason we applied early. We also applied to the Corps early, but they will not issue a decision without the order of conditions and your special permit being issued.
Then it isn't important. I mean, then we don't need to have that.
You can get, the whole town will be furnished a copy. It's important, but it's not important in issuing your order because I can't get those until you issue your approval.
Oh, okay. You need our permission first.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Jones, would you like to read the correspondence into the record?
From the Harbor Master Inspection Report concerning navigational issues and mooring issues, there have been no issues observed at this time, and their recommendation is approved as proposed. From the Falmouth Conservation Commission, fairly lengthy standard order of conditions, but in addition, we have some special order conditions for them. No dredging can be conducted between January 15th and May 31st. Prior to dredging, the applicant shall submit a dewatering plan to the Conservation Department. Number 3, a turbidity curtain shall be deployed around the area to be dredged to limit the effects of suspended sediments within the water column during dredge activities. Number 4, the Conservation Department shall be notified to the date and time of dredging activities. But beyond that, their recommendation is to go ahead with the project. We also have a statement from the Acting Director of Natural Resources, which I'll read for the record. The area proposed to be dredged contains shellfish. If the applicant is not willing to fully stipulate this matter, our department would be happy to provide staff and a boat to join the Conservation Administrator to conduct some test digs to clarify. At this time, the Department of Natural Resources is petitioning the DMF to open Falmouth Harbor on a seasonal basis for shellfishing. And then we do have from the Department Division of Marine Fisheries reviewed the notice of intent and describes what fishes are in there, what shellfish are in there, and that's where the recommendation for the January 15th to May 31st came from.
And for the board's edification, I forwarded to you all a draft document that Town Council had provided for us with respect to the issues that we would consider for wetlands permits, and in this case, adequacy of the site in terms of the size for the proposed use, suitability of the site for the proposed use, impact on traffic flow and safety, impact on neighborhood visual character including views and vistas, adequate supply of water, sewage disposal and drainage, adequate utilities and public services, impact on supply of affordable housing in the town, compliance with any planning board conditions or decisions, compliance with provisions of the zoning bylaw regarding parking, nuisance, site design, stormwater management, groundwater discharge, and traffic management. Obviously, some of these may not apply in this particular situation. Do we have any further questions from the board?
Well, I just have one question. One of the special conditions, Mike, was that prior to the dredging, that the Conservation Department receive a dewatering plan. Is that, or do you already have that?
I haven't submitted yet because there's two ways of dredging this. One way was we started out trying to bring a crane into this area, but he can't reach some of these areas. So the other alternative is to bring a barge in. And if we bring a barge in, then we would be dewatering on the barge. There's two different techniques. So when they choose whatever technique it is, if they put on the barge, they'll bring it down to one of the bulkheads and offload it onto trucks. This is suitable sand for beach nourishment.
Right. Okay.
All right. Is there anyone in the general public who would wish to present any testimony in opposition, or excuse me, in favor of? We'll start with those in favor of this project. Anyone in opposition of this project? All right. How would the board like to proceed?
I would move approval.
Do we need to close the hearing and then discuss it?
We do need, yes, we do need to close the hearing first.
I would move that we close the hearing for discussion among the board.
Okay, motion to
Second.
close, second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. All right. And how would the board like to proceed? We can move approval, we could deny, we could take it under advisement and address this at another meeting.
Well, I think this is not the first time that this area has been dredged. I think it was dredged back in '99, using the same sort of a plan. And I think the Conservation Commission's special conditions are clear. And I think the applicant's representative, Mike McGrath, understands what still needs to be done, which is the dewatering plan, and knows about the time frame where it cannot be dredged. So with that information, I would move approval of the plan.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
I just need to know, do we have a planned date that we're making an approval on?
That's an excellent question, and we have one here in the file.
And
The plan is dated February 26, 2013, with revision date of March 21, 2013.
do you want to add that to your motion?
I'll add that to my motion, the date of the plan.
Okay, second. And I just make some comments that one of the issues that we want to continue to do is continue to maintain Falmouth Harbor as a working harbor. We know just past this location is the Island Queen, which adds a tremendous amount of commerce in this community. Then just after that, it's a property under agreement with Cape Wind, where they intend on bringing quite a few jobs. We may continue to see this type of scenario because this is a working harbor, and we want to be able to have boats to be able to traverse it. So I think it's something that this board will continue to see.
Another comment I wanted to make is, in reading the documents, I learned about the location of where the dredged material can go, and I found that very interesting. It's very specific as to where it can go in respect to the high water mark and on what beaches it can go, and it really has to go in specific places that fit the kind of dredged material coming up, which I had not thought of carefully enough, but I was interested to find out about that.
Yeah, the Conservation Commission is very particular about those things. All right, any further comment? All right, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we have a continued hearing now. This is an application for a new package store license, wine and malt beverages only, the Falmouth Fruit and Produce Company, doing business as Jack and the Beanstalk. This is continued from July 15, 2013. Is the applicant or the applicant's representative present?
And just to clarify, we had not closed this hearing. This is still
Correct.
continuing testimony, is that right? Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Jeff Oppenheim for the applicant. I'm an attorney here in Falmouth, practicing at 156 Locust Street. My client, Robert Burke, is here. And as the board knows, we're seeking a new license to sell wine and beer in his store. He's been here in business for 35 years. He's been at this location for 2 years. I think I failed to mention at our initial hearing that he supports annually the Students Against Drunk Drivers by allowing them to place signs on his property during the run-up to the prom. He also supports the after-prom party, which is, as everyone knows, not only alcohol-free, but designed to try to keep our students safe after the prom. For the benefit of those that are here who were not privy to the communications with the board in the last couple of weeks, if I might, Mr. Chairman, just quickly review that after the last meeting, I called the general counsel to the ABCC. I asked him specifically about the issue of how do we measure the 500 feet. His response was clear. He directed me also to the regulations, which I found less clear, but his interpretation was clear, and that was that the distance is to be measured 500 feet on a straight line from building to building. So that's how the ABCC interprets that section of their regulations. We did a Google Map application, and the buildings, the high school and my client's store is 865 feet separated. I did mention to council at the ABCC that in that 865 feet were playing fields that were owned by the community, that were utilized by our students at the high school, so he was aware of that. I communicated what I learned to town council so that he would know what information was passed to me, and my understanding is that he has communicated directly with the board on this issue. I think as a result of this information, I would say to you that it is clear that the board does not have the burden of finding that the issuance of the license is not detrimental to the education of the students at Falmouth High School. That would be a burden that you have if the structures were within 500 feet of one another. It doesn't mean that the school committee is not entitled to their opinion or any citizen in the community on this issue. But as the regulations stand, this is like any other license that you would be facing as far as criteria. I know that the school committee has sent you a letter, a thoughtful letter. It comes from Dr. Gifford, but Dr. Gifford was charged with trying to capture the feelings of the school committee when they discussed it last week. I know that you'll review that thoughtfully if you haven't already. And I certainly have looked at it on behalf of my client, and some of the statements made in there by Dr. Gifford are absolutely accurate, that the athletic fields are within 500 feet. I would say to the board that to conclude that therefore alcoholic beverages would be condoned on our athletic fields is absolutely untrue. Certainly not condoned by our client. You control where alcoholic beverages are served in our community. And, you would have to grant a license for anyone to sell alcoholic beverages on any town-owned property. And it certainly would be, contradictory to what this community is trying to do to allow that use on public property so proximate to one of our schools. Dr. Gifford says that having a package store at the gateway to the high school runs counter to what our community should be instilling in our youth. So I think it's going to be up to the board to assess whether having a package store 865 feet from a school in this community with no outside advertising. My client would agree to a condition where there's, no outside advertising. Students can drive by there and school buses can drive by there and, not know that alcoholic beverages are being served or being sold inside. They're not being served, they're being sold. I think students are much more sophisticated than that. They're passing all kinds of advertising on their way to school. they're coming from all villages of our community to the high school. You cannot run away from the advertising that is pervasive, not only in our community, but on, all kinds of media for the sale of alcoholic beverages. So I'm not an educator, but I would assume that our educators and those that are concerned about abuse of alcohol and other drugs in the community are, teaching our students that, just because you see signs or because of its availability doesn't mean that you should be using it, certainly if you're underage. And my client will not condone the sale to underage people. The board should also reflect on the fact that our police chief basically gave an unqualified okay to this board. He said, make sure you review the law, which the law he cited was the 500 feet issue. But he didn't see a problem from the policing standpoint in the sale of wine and beer at this location. So, as a community, we don't condone underage drinking, and it's not going to be condoned on my client's property. We try to help our students learn about this. It would be a rather foolish student, I would think, that would try to, buy alcohol in this location, because, they may bump in to their school principal, or perhaps their guidance counselor, or maybe they'll bump into Mrs. Jones, who lives next door. I mean, if you are out to buy illegally alcohol, that would be the last place I would think you'd try it, because it's, a place where a lot of people in our community go, and these kids would be recognized if they try to do that. So I disagree respectfully with some of the conclusions that are advanced without facts in Dr. Gifford's letter. And I say that in as respectful a way as I possibly can, because my client, way before this application went in, was a supporter of, and will continue to be a supporter of, the non-use of alcoholic beverages in our community by underage drinkers. And I hope you take that into consideration. I know the board, because of recent decisions, has been faced with having to analyze each application on its merits, and not to look at a parade of horrible things that might happen because of a location. That's not factual, okay? We are licensed, we're going to be reviewed annually, and if we're not responsible as a vendor, then you're going to pull our license, and that's your right. But we are going to be responsible. And that won't happen, and you won't have problems with this location. This is first and foremost a fruit and produce operation, okay? It's very limited sales of wine and beer, okay? You go into that store, the pervasive feeling is fresh fruit and vegetable, okay? Healthy choices for everyone in our community, and certainly our students. And I think that's why they go there. There's lots of good, healthy choices. And I would just ask the board to consider that, consider the facts. I know there's a lot of folks here this evening from the school committee and from the prevention organization who I'm sure will have thoughtful things to address to the board. I might want to have an opportunity to rebut, but I thank you.
Okay. Now, you all should have received the letter from the school board. I don't know if anyone considers it necessary to read it into the record. It is a part of the record.
I'm just unclear about one thing in the letter. It basically says that it's the feeling of the school committee. I just wanted to make sure that the school committee actually took a vote on this.
We could ask members, I know there are members of the school
Was
committee.
this an
The
item that
chair,
was on the
Madam
agenda
Chair?
and that was voted on? That's all.
I'm Judy Fenwick, Chairman of the School Committee. We did not vote on this because it was not an article that was before us for a vote. We had a consensus agreement, and thus the letter was generated out of that agreement.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, we'll open up the floor to testimony from the public. Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to this license? Thank you very much.
We like facts.
Good evening. My name's Karen Kadira. I'm the Director of the Human Services Department for the town. I've also been the liaison to the Substance Abuse Commission for the last 12 years. And I want to give you a few of the facts. Prevention science has come a long, long way in the last decade. We now have lots of data from over 30 years of national public health research. This data has identified 20 risk factors that can reliably predict 5 problem behaviors in adolescence, such as alcohol and drug abuse, delinquency, dropping out of school, teen pregnancy, and violence. I've provided you with a chart of those risk factors, basically because I couldn't resist an opportunity to give a little education. But the 3 risk factors that are relevant to your decision tonight are highlighted in yellow and would be the availability of drugs, and this includes alcohol, the community laws and norms favorable to drug use, and that includes alcohol, and the early initiation of the problem behavior of underage drinking. The Substance Abuse Commission, Together We Can, and the Falmouth Prevention Partnership have devoted over $600,000 federal dollars, $40,000 local dollars, and over $1 million of in-kind hours and services in the last 5 years to altering the social norms in our community which put our kids at risk of substance abuse. At the same time, we recognize that alcohol use by adults is a common and accepted part of our culture, an important part of the hospitality industry on the Cape. The law prohibiting liquor sales near schools, however, is intended to promote a safe zone where children congregate so that kids will not be exposed to alcohol and drugs at a young age. This is not a leftover of prohibition, but rather a law grounded in years of social science and clear evidence. The public health research shows that youth who begin drinking before age 15 are 4 times more likely to become addicted to alcohol as adults. In 2009, Falmouth High School students reported that the average age of their first use of alcohol was 13 years old. That figure has improved slightly with all the community work that I've mentioned above, but it is still well below the 15 years of age. Jack and the Beanstalk is a respected business owner and a responsible member of our community. In fact, they participate in some of the town's prevention efforts, such as the after-prom party and the posting of signs regarding drinking and driving. We are not concerned that their employees will knowingly sell alcohol to minors. In fact, Falmouth youth who drink report that they do not purchase the alcohol themselves. Rather, they get it from family, friends, and social contacts. As we know, many high school students stop at Jack and the Beanstalk after school. They will be witnessing the sale of alcohol to adults as a routine matter in a local produce stand that is normally recognized as a place to purchase healthy and nutritious food items. This may give youth the message that alcohol is just like any other healthy food substance. Furthermore, kids could easily ask adults entering or leaving the school to purchase alcohol for them. This is something that the Jack and the Beanstalk employees would have much less control over. In addition, there's planning in place to move the football field to the high school property in the foreseeable future. This will naturally bring large crowds, both young and old, to that corner of our town. It would not be in the best interests of our youth or our community to facilitate a tailgating-type atmosphere at these sporting events. Finally, we all recognize the need to support our local businesses in order to maintain a strong community. But we must also recognize that substance use lessens the potential of our youth, and addiction destroys lives, hurts businesses, and costs this country millions each year in law enforcement, health care, and lost revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak in opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Bonnie Gifford, as you know, from the Falmouth School District. And I wondered, I know that you did receive our letter. I'm not quite sure when you were able to have a chance to read it, but I'd like to summarize some of our points for the community. And first, I would like to say once again that during our meeting that the school committee was very adamant on the respect and admiration that they have for Mr. Burke, but did want to express our sentiments being the stewards of the educational system here in this community. So a couple of the things that I'd just like to summarize once again, that we understand that the letter of the law for granting this license rests on the number of feet, and we are within that. However, we are concerned once again with the fields that are adjacent, and as the lady before me just spoke, when the multi-purpose field comes in, et cetera, all of these things that are happening, what message that is sending to our youth. And the crux of the matter is the location for us and the accessibility, that it's right there, and what message are we sending to our students, as we said, whether there are community events happening in this field, whether frequenting the store, et cetera. And most students consider their community to be their schools, and to be that property, and to be what's happening on those school grounds. So, you know, with the athletic team, the sports contest, everything that's happening in those fields, families pull up, et cetera, and they're seeing alcohol, et cetera. So what message, once again, is that sending to our youth? And we're helping them to make healthy choices. And as we all know, underage drinking is a concern not only in Falmouth, but everywhere, obviously, and that we have had positive relationships with the Falmouth Prevention Partnerships, et cetera, that have been involved in several initiatives to try to diminish the underage drinking, decrease in underage drinking, and send the positive, right message to our students. So we believe that supporting Jack and the Beanstalk, once again, although we absolutely respect the work and contributions that Mr. Burke has made to our community, and would never in any way think, obviously, he is trying to sell underage to underage drinkers, et cetera. But that supporting this request is in direct contradiction to the work being done in the community in conjunction with the Falmouth Prevention Partnership. And just in closing, the consensus of the school committee is that we will continue our proactive path and collaboration with the Falmouth Prevention Partnership and the community to reduce underage drinking. And we hope your decision will reflect the spirit of our community as we support our youth and try to decrease that. So thank you for your time.
Anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to the application?
It's not fully in opposition, but I just want to make some comments. I'm Dr. Michael Byharry. I'm a pediatrician, retired pediatrician, and I chair the Falmouth Prevention Partnership. We have worked very closely with the schools, and we have begun to have some success. The school committee and the superintendent and Karen Cadera have given you all the facts and information from our perspective. What I would like to add, though, is that if you decide to give this license, what we would like to see is that Jack and the Beanstalk, since they are located right next to the high school and a lot of students come in, that they work with us to promote the social awareness programs that we have, including being involved in Sticker Shock, which all of the other liquor stores in town, except for one, have participated in over the past 2 or 3 years, and to also work with us to perhaps provide educational materials for students when they come in. So if a student comes in, not only will they see alcohol being sold, but they'll also get materials that's a clear message that it's against the law for them to drink or purchase alcohol, but also what the dangers and issues are. Thank you.
Anyone else in opposition? Anyone who'd like to speak in favor of the application?
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address the board on this issue. My name is Bill Zammer. I'm the holder of 2 liquor licenses in town, one at the Flying Bridge Restaurant on Scranton Avenue and the other on Gifford Street, the Coonamessett Inn. I'd like to pick up 2 points tonight, one of which is I've known Bob Burke for 20-some years, a very reputable business person. He has been in business in a number of locations, owns a great deal of real estate, and I think that what he does to the community has been fantastic. He donates a lot to the community. His store is very convenient to the area, to area residents. The taxes he pays for help support these schools. I think the last thing we would want to do is to sell liquor to a minor. None of us do. On the other point, I'd like to speak to, I respect fully the opinion of the school committee. I really do. I mean, the bane of our existence in holding liquor licenses in any town is watching minors attempt to buy drinks, whether it's at weddings or coming in, and it's a very difficult thing, and we do try to educate them. But I think their argument is specious at best. These kids are already exposed to liquor. The prom is held in various restaurants that serve, including one of mine, that serve liquor. Of course, we don't do it in that room. We remove everything. But they see it. And I think, are we being naive in thinking that these kids don't see this stuff? They see it at their parents' homes. They see it in driving around. And kids, by the way, don't buy $20 plus bottles of Nantucket locally, or local wines that are made here in Nantucket or Falmouth or whatever. They're buying beer or booze if they can get it. This is not a bar that we're talking about. This is a minor part of Bob's business. I just think with the regulations that we face today and being in business, that in order for him to stay in business, if he needs that additional income and revenue, it helps him. And I would like to ask that the board rules in favor of him. And thank you for your time.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and to the rest of the board. First of all, if you...
And by the way, I am sure he will have his employees take a tips course as an alcohol awareness course about selling liquor to minors. Sorry.
Ahmed, could you identify yourself for the record, please?
My name is Ahmed Mustafa, Precinct 4. And if you've ever been in the new building down there on Gifford and Brick Hill Road, they have more cameras in there than the NSA has in their building. So when you walk in that door all the way through, you're recorded. It's perfect protection for the community. The kids are smart enough to realize that they're going to go someplace where they can get a person over 21 to buy their alcohol. Those people hang around on Main Street. They're not hanging around the corner of Brick Hill and Gifford Street. Mr. Burke, I've known him and his brothers for over 35 years. Perfect people. They haven't done anything wrong as far as I can have any knowledge about. They run a good operation. It's very clean and concise, and his community spirit is enough to keep this going. I think that the choice of giving them a license at that location will be well documented. And also, you've got the enforcement factor. If they do something wrong, you can always take the license away. So, you've got those things to work with. I think it's a chance to give them a shot at it and let the people who want this available to them when they're on their way home to be able to pick up a bottle of wine and some cheese and take it home with them. So I think it's a good choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak in favor of this application?
I don't actually want to speak in favor of it, although I have nothing negative to say about Mr. Burke, and I don't think anyone here could find anything. Mark Finner in Precinct 6. But I'd just like to point out a little history, and it kind of reflects on some of the foresight we lack when we have large capital projects. That piece of property could have been purchased for $165,000 when we built the high school, and we wouldn't be here talking about this now. And I just want to point that out, because it was a mistake.
Anyone else would like to speak in favor of this application?
Good evening. My name is Robert Burke, the owner of the Jack and the Beanstalk. I just would like to say I'd be more than happy to work with the doctor in any programs to help educate any of the underage drinkers. Thank you.
Since you're here, it was the testimony of your representative that you would be agreeable to no outside advertising of alcoholic beverages?
Yes, we offer Dex. It's going to be such a minor part of our business.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? All right. Mr. Burke, you or your representative will get the last word, and then I think we can close the hearing, unless...
We have no further comment.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I'm not sure whether
We
we
can
had this
ask
question
them in
before.
our discussion.
I mean, if we close the hearing, can we still ask questions
Yes.
of the?
If there's some clarification needed, certainly, yes. All right.
Make a motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous. All right, how would the board like to proceed? Have some
I guess I have a
discussion?
question for the board, who may have more experience with the ABCC than I do. We just had our hands slapped on a recent liquor license, and my concern about this is not as much what Mr. Burke is suggesting, but once we grant a liquor license for wine and malt, that the next owner of this building then does much more than what was intended here. And we try to put in a condition on the liquor store at the West Falmouth, at the Chappie Grill Mall, and then the ABC can say, well, you can't put that restriction on there. I'd be worried that we'd put the restriction saying you can't have outdoor advertisement, and then the ABC would say, well, you're now handcuffing them and not allowing them to do the business. And they can come back and say, actually, you have to allow that. And, you know, to sell local wines with the cheese and produce as someone's going home, I think is great. But to also be available to expand for the next business that's there, to put up outside advertising, I would really worry that we'd be opening the door to that possibility. And so that's where I'm torn in this issue.
And I've thought long and hard about this. I think what the applicant is looking to do is add this as a convenience item and not to make this his primary source. Before I go into what I wanted to say, I believe that if the applicant agrees with the conditions this evening, and I think we can get that buy-in with the applicant, meaning he's already agreed that he would do no outdoor signage on his kiosks or in the windows for that type of scenario. I think that this board could limit the floor space to maximum of 15% within the establishment. If he agrees to those, any future applicant then would have to come to this board to have those conditions changed. I think one of the other areas that Mr. Burke voluntarily presented and that we could put on a condition is that all of the alcoholic beverages that are on display in the store would be within line sight of the checkout counter. He told us where they would be. But I think those are three very real conditions that would meet your needs and would prohibit anybody else who bought that license or who bought that store without having to come back for a full-fledged hearing. So I think that, and I know we closed the hearing, but I think we had some consensus with the applicant in regard to those issues. So where we had some problems was we imposed some conditions that the applicants were not willing to accept. And that's why we had a hearing at the ABCC.
I just wanted to respond to what Doug was saying before I get into my own comments, too. This is a time for the board to deliberate. Once we close the hearing, it's our time to talk about these things. And I think that you have to remember, this is only for 1 year. And any conditions can be changed. Either the applicant can come forward and request a change to the license, or we could, based on whatever might happen during the course of the year. So whatever this is, it's really for a year because they're all renewable on an annual basis. So nothing precludes the same thing from occurring the following year unless the parties agree. So I don't think we have to worry about setting any kind of a precedent because every year on an annual basis it becomes a whole new license.
Okay. I think that all the information we received this evening is beneficial and is necessary for us to hear. But I think one of the things that I didn't hear is the fact that public schools in this town or state are all drug-free zones. And that goes so far. It goes to the limit of where the property line starts and it stops. The things about the laws that have been in the state of Massachusetts are always about the distance from the building to where there is alcohol that is being served. And I thought, what if the Beanstalk was on one of the other three corners? What if it wasn't right on that corner? Also right on that corner is a big stone that says Falmouth High School. So I think that when people come into that area and are driving toward the high school, that whole area mentally is the high school. The fact that the Beanstalk is right there and wants to bring alcohol in, it is still in some people's mind, that's high school. And there's a thought about that in my mind. High schools are drug-free zones. On the other side of talking about our young people in this town is to say that you could go into the Windfall Market and you can buy your loaf of bread and go to the bakery and go right by a whole area of beer and wine. You can play football over at Fuller Field and look across the street and see John's Liquor Store. So there is a mixture of young people and alcohol in many places in the town. Where the line comes down is to the point of we are talking about high school students, whether they drink or they don't drink. It is the idea that at a high school it's a drug-free zone. So I think about that part of it. And it is to listen to people who say, those teenagers, we all know those teenagers have a lot more ways than we ever think of to have whatever it is that they think is illegal is more fun. So I want people to kind of think about, in saying that, high school areas are drug-free zones.
Mr. Murphy?
You took a couple of my thoughts, Becky, and I
Well,
appreciate.
you told me before.
I did not. And the thoughts are that currently, for as many years as I can remember, all of our high school football games and all of our high school baseball games have been played at Gov Fuller Field. As you pull into that Gov Fuller Field, there's access on all three directions, whether it's Cappy's or John's Liquors or Windfall Market. People are not in a vacuum. And Karen, with all due respect, I know Human Services does a wonderful job, as well as the school committee. And we all need to be a partnership to make sure that folks in this community understand the ramifications of underage drinking. But the vast majority of the exposure to underage drinking is in the home. We need to start with the adults. I know all of those facts. I've made my livelihood in the alcohol industry and try to do it responsibly most of my adult life. And where adolescents get exposed to drugs and alcohol are in their homes. And we need to educate their parents. We don't need them to think that we can keep them in a vacuum when they leave the household, because that's not reality. Reality is that the Jack and the Beanstalk is offering healthy foods next to the high school. Healthy foods, incidentally, craft wines and craft beers, which are produced in the state of Massachusetts, are much better, if you're legal, than drinking a sugared soda. Those are some things that we should applaud the Jack and the Beanstalk for, is providing healthy choices to our students when they leave the school and when they have an opportunity to buy them. This is going to be a convenience item within this establishment. It is not a package store. It's called a packaged wine and beer license because you can't consume it on the premises. Shame be told, every license, every permit that this board issues for any public property specifically says no alcohol consumption on public property, unless this board issues an alcoholic license for that property, which we do on occasion at the band shell. There are some realities here, and I want to protect our kids just as much as anybody. But the point be told is, we can't isolate them, we need to educate them. We need to let them know that certain things can be done and certain things can't be done. I don't believe Mr. Burke sells tobacco products, and he's made a conscious decision not to do that. Why? Because he sells healthy products. Granted, wine and beer for his adult consumers provide another alternative for them when they go home. And I think that this license is renewable on a yearly basis. I know the Burkes, and I know the type of operation they run. I know that we would be actually very hypocritical because we have school events at many locations in this community that provide alcohol, whether it be the volunteers in public schools. Awards nights are very often held in restaurants that have liquor licenses. The prom, as Mr. Zammer has mentioned. The point be told, we're trying to educate them. We're not trying to let them think that it doesn't exist, because the truth is it does exist. And we have to make sure that they understand. And we want to teach them that it is a drug, and that the reason the age is 21 and is no longer 18 is because you have to be able to consume it responsibly when you do consume it. And I think with some specific conditions that the school committee specifically said, they didn't want folks to come into town and see that. Mr. Burke had said that he would be happy to accept that no signage on the exterior of the building, on his kiosks out front. Another one would be no more than 15% of the entire floor display space inside the building for the merchandising of the products. And the other condition would be that all of the products have to be within line sight, not only just cameras, but line sight of the cashier, who is always at the register, who always would be able to view the products. I would make a motion to approve this based on those three conditions.
Well, before I take any motions,
Okay.
I'd like to make sure everybody has the opportunity to say their piece or ask their questions. Any other comments from the board or questions from the board?
Yeah, I have
Ms.
some
Lund?
comments. Well, I read very carefully the letter from the school committee, and having lived here for a long time, I appreciate very much everyone's concerns. And I've worked with Karen Cordera as a member of this board, with the Substance Abuse Commission, with the Prevention Partnership, with the grant, with all of that. And I really do understand the concerns of everyone, every parent who has a child who can possibly be exposed to alcohol. And then I had to look at it from the position of fairness in terms of the applicant, and also the applicant himself and the type of business he has. The fact that this is not a package store, but in fact this is a request for an accessory. It's more of an accessory use to the business than it is a full-fledged package store. And I thought also about the package store across the street from the rec center and from Fuller Field, where, I mean, there are children there 7 days a week, all the time. And that is a full-fledged package store. And so I thought about the fact that, and I want to thank Jeff Oppenheimer too for contacting the ABCC and getting that additional information and educating us once and for all that this isn't a 500-foot issue, it's really a direct line. I think that was very helpful. So now we know that that section of the ABCC regulations do not apply in this case, that 500 feet. So then it really forced us to look at, well, what are the real issues here? The issues of fairness to the applicant and the real issues that the school department has, the teachers have, the parents have, about the nearness, if you will, of wine to their children. And then I thought about the business, he has 10 cameras in that store. And I thought, it's a lot easier to walk out the door with a cucumber or a tomato or a carrot, than it is to walk out with a bottle of wine. Not that that's what anyone would do. But I understand why you have to have such security in a business that handles produce, because that could go out the door and no one would ever know unless you were really monitoring it. So those 10 cameras, I think, make a huge difference. And the cameras also record. I don't say it's for perpetuity, but it records, the recording is there for a period of time. It's just not one of those things that you can see it if you're looking at it, but then it's not there afterwards. And then I thought about the fact that Bobby, whom I have known for a long, long time, is an on-premise owner. He isn't someone who just has a business and then goes off and does other things. He's on the premises there, and he has very good people who also work there as well, who share his values and know what his business objectives are and how he wants his business run. So it isn't as if he's not there, then the rules change. That doesn't really happen. And what else did I want to say? Oh, and the fact that there's no outside advertising, I think that makes a huge difference. Because if you don't see the big sign, Schlitz or Budweiser or something like that, or wine, you wouldn't, what? I shouldn't be advertising?
I don't know if they make it anymore, Pat.
Oh, okay, well, what do I'm not a beer drinker, so I wouldn't know. So they'd all be safe with me, wouldn't they? Anyway, I think the whole idea of no outside advertising, I think that's a plus too. So now it comes down for me to the issue of fairness. And in all fairness, I really could not see any reason to deny this application. It just doesn't rise to that level to me. It's a one-year license. There are mechanisms in place, not only with the cameras, but also with police observation, with people being able to call a police officer if they see someone doing it. There are all kinds of efforts in place to observe and follow up on any breach of the selling of alcohol. And then we also have, if we receive complaints, we have the ability as a board to ask the individual to come in for a hearing. And we bring the people in who complain, and we can schedule a public hearing at any time based on a complaint that rises to the level of a true complaint. So there are a lot of mechanisms in place, I think, to deal with this. And then over the course of the year, he has to come back next year and reapply for the license again, which is another opportunity. If people have issues, they can bring them there. So I'm coming down on the issue of fairness in this one, and I'm going to support it.
Is it appropriate to ask the applicant if they were willing to the conditions that Mr. Murphy has suggested? Because I'd also add the fourth condition that he work with the Falmouth Prevention Partnership on the sticker shock campaign and with the doctor that suggested. Is that appropriate to ask that?
All those conditions are acceptable.
I'd like to put in my 2 cents as well, I guess, and I would fall back to where Mr. Jones started the conversation, was the recent remand that we had with regards to the liquor license in West Falmouth. And one of the things that I recall from that decision the ABCC remanded to us was they talked about a parade of horribles. I don't know if that was the exact term that they used.
Yes, it was.
So that's probably why it's sticking in my head. While I appreciate the concerns of the school committee, and obviously the risk factors here and the mention, for example, of the availability of drugs, and of course that does include alcohol because we know alcohol is a drug. But one of the problems I have with this is that nowhere in the information that's been presented to us is there anything in terms of, say, data that proves that a liquor store or some establishment that sells liquor near a school, that, say, the students at that school have a higher incidence of substance abuse versus an establishment which is away from the school. So that is the kind of factual information I would think that we need in order to convince the ABCC that denying the license would be warranted under these circumstances. There's also the issue of, as Ms. Flynn said, fairness, but there's also the issues of accessibility and geographical distribution that, again, we have to consider that there are so many licenses granted the town that we are allowed to grant to applicants. And from a geographical perspective, it is one of the things that the ABCC is going to look at is, are there other establishments in the vicinity that offer, you don't think it's a...
I don't think, no, because this isn't one of the 25 package store licenses.
It's one of 12
This is an
beer and
accessory
wine.
Beer and
use,
wine,
yeah.
right. It seems to me, though, that from their decision, that they had, the remand that they gave to us, that the idea of competition and proximity of these establishments to the general population is a factor that they might consider. And as I look at this particular situation, this is an area of town where there are no other establishments nearby, and it might be of some value to the general public to be able to have this in that vicinity. I found it interesting that there was a statement that the school committee is not concerned about the sale of alcohol by the applicant to minors. And I think that, too, speaks very strongly to what the ABCC is going to look at. We can't, on the one hand, say we're concerned about the proximity of this establishment near a school, and on the other hand, say that we're not concerned, we don't think that they're going to sell alcohol to minors. It's contradictory. And the suggestion that students may approach adults who are entering or leaving the school to purchase for them, well, that may be the case. It may be the case now. And again, whether there's an establishment near the school or far away from the school, as Mr. Murphy noted, there are several in the vicinity of Town Hall. Someone could do that just as easily anywhere else as they could right next to the school. I think we still need to deny it. We would need some factual basis to say that having this license so near the school is going to increase the precedence or the prevalence of that. And we don't have that. And I guess finally, I would note the question of drug-free zones. And while it's a wonderful idea and concept to say that it is a drug-free zone or it is a something-free zone, the reality, and we know very well, is that if someone is going to disobey the law, they're not going to care whether there's a sign that says that this is a drug-free zone or not. We can say that it's a drug-free zone or an alcohol-free zone or this free zone or that free zone, but as history has taught us, the people who are going to obey that sort of a sign would obey it anyway, simply because that is the ethics and the nature of people, that we know that it is not an appropriate thing to bring alcohol or drugs into a school. And yet, we still find drugs in schools, in spite of the fact that they are drug-free zones. So those are my 2 cents, and I would tend to agree with the other members of the board who have suggested that with some reasonable restrictions, I think it makes sense to support this license. Are there any other comments or questions from the board?
I would just make one comment. We had one person address us earlier that talked about the school department purchasing that land at the time the high school was built, and that was a major discussion with the school side, and the price was double what it eventually sold, and the school side did not have the money. So it was, I just wanted to clear that up when I heard that. That was not an accurate statement. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. I'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to do so. I make a motion to approve the wine and malt package license for the Jack and the Beanstalk with the following conditions: that there be no advertising on the kiosk and/or the building on the premises, that the display space be limited to 15% of the floor space within the establishment, and that all alcoholic beverages be within line sight of the checkout counter. And then the fourth condition is that and I don't think we can put this actually on the license, that he would work, we would hope that he would work with the drug-free partnership. I don't think that's a restriction we can actually put on the license. But my motion is to include those 3 restrictions and to approve the license as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion on the motion? All right, call for the vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? One opposed. The motion carries. All right, next item on our agenda is an application for a pledge of liquor license, Grumpy's Pub, 29 Locust Street. Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138 of the General Laws as amended that King Cormac, Inc., doing business as Grumpy's Pub, has applied for a pledge of license/stock for an all-alcoholic common victualler liquor license to be located at 29 Locust Street, Falmouth, Massachusetts. A hearing will be held in the Selectmen's Meeting Room this evening, Monday, July 29, 2013, at 7 p.m. The applicant or the applicant's representative present? All right. Hearing none,
We do have from the police department. They have no problem with the request.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's pretty clear cut. It's just pledging a license. This is something they do, and we really, it's more, if there's a legitimate financial service organization that's providing the funds, I think that I would make a motion to approve.
Before we take any motions, this is a public
Oh, it's a
hearing,
hearing.
so
Sorry about that.
that's all right. And we will take public testimony. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to this license, to this pledge? Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of this pledge? Okay.
Move we close the hearing.
Motion to close the hearing.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. All right, how shall we proceed?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the pledge of liquor license. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. All right, next on our agenda, we have the Water Quality Management Committee here to present the final draft of the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Permit. Good evening. While you folks are getting set up, just for the public and the board, this is our first run, I guess you could say. We're simply going to be, we'll be given the presentation and entertaining questions from the public and, of course, the board, try to address any concerns, questions, comments. The Water Quality Management Committee will be back before us next month, at which time the anticipation is that we would make a decision as to whether or not we wanted to approve this and send it along to the state.
Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Eric Turkington, Chairman of the Falmouth Water Quality Management Committee, and with me here tonight is Virginia Valiela, Vice Chairman of the committee. You have all received a 2-volume set of something like this, which is draft comprehensive wastewater management plan and final environmental impact report and targeted watershed management plan for the town of Falmouth. Those of you who have looked at it will find that it's very similar in all respects to the document you approved 1 year ago in the year 2012. Basically what happened is we took the document that you approved back in August, we sent it to the state for review. It came back, it was deemed adequate, but it came back with 246 comments or questions or observations that had to be addressed, and that's the way this process goes. So that's a lot of comments and questions, and Virginia Valiela spent more time than I could have imagined anybody wanting to spend on something like this. to answer the questions, and more importantly, to kind of reorganize it. Because some of the questions were about the order, and it was hard to follow because there was history mixed in with current proposals and such. She rearranged it in a comprehensive and a easy-to-follow manner, and we now have a document that I think it certainly is a model for Cape Cod, and it's probably a model for the state on how to do this right. So the draft before you includes all of that. It includes the history, it includes the current plan as approved by the board, and it includes answers to those 246 comments from agencies and interested individuals. Just to remind everyone in the general public, can we go? Falmouth's plan to restore our estuaries includes these 5 basic elements: to sewer as little as possible, to pursue the demonstration projects, which we all know we are the cutting edge in Massachusetts, if not the country, on these demonstration projects, to incorporate them as they are proven to be successful and cost effective into the CWMP later on, using what they called adaptive management. And number 4, it does involve some upgrades of the treatment plant. And the key element, which I think we've all agreed on and wish to pursue, is that these projects be funded with no tax rate increase. It's a 20-year plan, but it looks out over the next 40 years at all of Falmouth's 15 estuaries and how best to approach cleaning them up. The plan that you approved and the town meeting has approved includes these elements: nitrogen control bylaw dealing with fertilizer, shellfish aquaculture, permeable reactive barriers, the Boynes Pond inlet opening, road runoff remediation, denitrifying septic systems, eco toilets, and lower Little Pond sewering. It's a major menu, and we're going to bring you up to date tonight on where we've gone in the last year as far as on all of these projects. The first one, and this is the most current and the happiest report we have to make tonight, is the nitrogen control bylaw, which, if you remember, town meeting in November 2012 adopted a bylaw that controlled the use of nitrogen on lawns for fertilizer. Everybody who's looked at this estuaries issue concludes that is, aside from home septic systems, fertilizer is probably the second cause of the pond's distress. And Falmouth was the first town to actually do something meaningful about it. In November 2012, we adopted a bylaw. The bylaw went up to Boston, where it was reviewed by the Attorney General, who concluded that the legislature had vested the authority in these matters in the State Department of Agricultural Resources, and therefore we were precluded from adopting our own bylaws. Fortunately for us, we have a very capable legislative delegation, and Tim Madden helped draft a proposed change to the law, and Terry Murray inserted it into the state budget, and the governor signed it. And so as of right now, that bylaw is back in effect, and we are the only town in Cape Cod, or Massachusetts for that matter, who has a nitrogen control bylaw in effect. And kudos to our legislators and to everyone who played a part in making that happen. The next item on our report here is the shellfish cultivation project. And back in May of this year, the Conservation Commission, after a certain amount of backing and forthing, issued an order of conditions to let the project go ahead. In June of this year, the town got some staff and equipment and purchased 2.5 million very, very small oysters to go into the Little Pond. July of this year, the oysters started going into Little Pond, and I'm happy to report that this is already out of date. We now have 1 million oysters in Oyster Pond instead of 500,000. They are currently growing. They are all quite happy, or at least 98% of them are quite happy. And by the end of this season, we're going to have 2.5 million oysters in Oyster Pond, in Little Pond, cleaning up nitrogen. The DEP is on board, Mass Conservation Commission's on board. We have a monitoring plan for the before, during, and after, so that we will know, after 2 or 3 years of this, just how effective this can be in reducing the nitrogen load not only in this water body, but in many other water bodies in this town. It's a great experiment. There's a bunch of wonderful volunteers down there putting together 3,000 bags, which is a project, to say the least. But they're having a great time, and they're doing something good for the town. The Boynes Pond Inlet Widening Project, I think you're all familiar with. It involves basically widening the channel. You can see what happens in Boynes Pond here when you widen. If you widen the channel, the blue, which is good, and clean water, expands, and that's the premise here, that if you have more flow, more flushing out of Boynes Pond, you will reduce the amount of nitrogen that stays in the pond, and therefore you will reduce the ill health that nitrogen creates. The scientists have determined that a 90-foot opening is what we need there. Right now we have a 50-foot opening. They conclude that we could remove as much nitrogen by doing this as sewering over 400 homes. So it's quite likely to be very cost effective. And the benefits to the Boynes Pond, of course, would be immediate as soon as you open it up. That project is in the design stage. We expect to come back to the Springtown meeting in 2014 for funding to actually build it. The building consists of not only making a wider channel, but making a longer bridge, since the current bridge wouldn't work. We're also going to include in this a fishing platform. The state has an agency that provides funds for this sort of thing. The designers say it can be done, and there's a lot of local enthusiasm for the idea of including a fishing platform in these plans. So for the next year or so, we'll be doing the design and the permitting, but this project is moving along very well. Permeable reactive barriers, I know the board knows what we're talking about here, but it's basically, the idea is to dig a big ditch that would intercept nitrogen as it comes out of people's homes and off a road runoff before it gets into the water bodies. The town's consultants have boiled this down, so we're now looking at one location in West Falmouth, right on Snug Harbor, and a couple of locations in East Falmouth, the Great Harbors neighborhood, and we're looking at two. We'll probably end up with one in Seacoast Shores. The preliminary designs are underway, and we hope by the spring of 2014 to come to town meeting with a price tag, if it turns out to be a feasible way to do it. There's two issues here. One is, does it intercept the nitrogen permanently and effectively and in a way that DEP can support? And how expensive is it? And that depends a lot on where you put it and the topography of where you're trying to put it. Every neighborhood is different, and some of them may be more suited or less suited. But we're going to have answers to both those questions, and particularly the price tag, in the spring of 2014. Eco toilets. I know the board is very familiar with this one. Falmouth, once again, is leading the parade, not only in the state of Massachusetts, but in the country, as far as actually scientifically evaluating the efficacy and consumer interest in this option. Since we started this project, and the board was very helpful in agreeing to a $5,000 bonus for people who agreed to participate in the program, 152 property owners have been contacted by the Water Quality Committee who expressed some interest in having this done in their house. 50 have had a site visit by SIA and occasionally with the plumbing inspector and other folks. 15 households have agreed to have an installation done in their house and be part of the program, and they are in that process now. 5 of them have already had their permits issued by the Board of Health. 10 of them are still in that process, and the additional 10 more are sort of queuing themselves up for a later application. When these things go in, George Hoyfelder and the test center will be monitoring, once again, the before, during, and after to see what happens, what level of nitrogen removal actually takes place as a result of these eco toilets being installed in people's houses. Because it doesn't, because it only takes the urine and the feces, thank you, solids, whatever, it's still an open question as to how much nitrogen is in the gray water, which wouldn't be intercepted by these things. And so that's what George Heufelder's test center is designed to show, whether or not that the nitrogen removal is sufficient to, once again, serve the community's goals and DEP's requirements. The State Board of Plumbing and Gas Fitters granted Falmouth test center status for urine diverting fixtures. We are the only place in the United States of America that has that distinction. And we have it because Sia Karplus went up there and wowed the State Board of Plumbing and Gas Fitters. They did not have a question she couldn't answer. And so by the end, they were happy to give us this opportunity for the town. And she's done a great job for the town. So that is that one. Now we move over to the other half of the project. The parallel paths, if you remember, involve demonstration projects and minimal sewering somewhere. So to speak on the minimal sewering somewhere will be Virginia.
Thank you and good evening. You'll probably recognize this slide from town meeting because in one picture it summarizes the thinking that has gone on in the town basically in the last 3.5 years, starting with a massive project over $600 million that would have sewered all of East Falmouth, north and south of Route 28, down to a more manageable $300 million round numbers, but really a huge number the town could not afford, down to what we identified as the place that we should start. Did we have an estuary that could not be cleaned up with the alternatives that we are pursuing? And that's the lower Little Pond watershed. Next slide, please. And this is just a recapping of the reasons for the Little Pond area being selected. It is our most degraded estuary. Has extremely small lots on both the Falmouth Heights side and the Mara Vista side. It is almost a build-out. There are less than half dozen empty lots. Many of those homes have cesspools, which are actually in the groundwater, and because the lots are so small, it's very hard to have repaired those. And even if they had Title V systems, you would still have the nitrogen issue. So next slide, please. We have defined the sewer service area, and this is in your report. This is, you could call this an official line, what's in and what's out. It is all of Mara Vista, below Nickerson Street. It goes all the way over to Great Pond, so there is a portion of the Great Pond watershed that is also benefiting from this sewer project. And on the Falmouth Heights side, it includes all of the area that contributes to Little Pond. There's a portion of Falmouth Heights that contributes either to Vineyard Sound or Inner Harbor, and that is not part of this sewer service area. It goes as far north as the T-Ticket School and basically hugs T-Ticket Highway. There are 1,500 parcels if you count inside the red line. There is another technical term which we felt was important to begin talking about, and it's called sewer equivalent units. Obviously, a motel uses more water. A laundromat would use more water than a house. And so depending on what commercial properties use in terms of their water, and the town has records, they are calculated as sewer equivalent units. So although we have 1,500 parcels, there really are 1,700 customers or units that will be a factor when we finally get to the betterment issue. The total gallonage expected out of this area inside the red line is 260,000 gallons per day. And the estimated cost is $44 million for the collection system and discharge. Next. Some more points about Lower Little Pond, and you have a picture there of what it can look like. Because it is so dense and because it is built out, it makes it very economical to install a collection system. We are adjacent to the existing sewer lines, the existing pumping station at Inner Harbor. The main, the water main in Main Street was sized to include this area so that all of those benefits accrue to reducing the actual cost of the project. The wastewater treatment plant has a capacity of about 1 million gallons, and they are only processing about 500,000 gallons. So again, there is capacity to include flow from Little Pond. As Eric said at town meeting, there was a long history of intending to include Mara Vista and Falmouth Heights in the sewer system. Next slide. The effluent is tertiarily treated. It's an additional step of treatment that reduces the level of nitrogen to 3 milligrams per liter. We have a plant that has that advanced treatment, and we have identified a new site that is outside of the West Falmouth watershed. The selectmen, I'm sure, will remember the settlement with Buzzards Bay Coalition and DEP, that if there was additional flow to the plant can process it, but they didn't want the discharge within the West Falmouth watershed because that's had so many issues with nitrogen already. So that white strip that is at the there we go, that is called Site 7. And it got that number when we were looking at the whole town, and it just happened to be number 7. We would be using the eastern end of Site 7. The 260 gallons does not need the whole site. So the eastern end is sort of near the road. That's the west. East end. There we go. Okay. So the eastern end of Site 7 would be the discharge point. Downstream, in part from Site 7, is Crocker Pond, and see if you could show that. And this has been a concern, certainly, of the abutters, and in the original draft environmental evaluation of Crocker Pond was not looked at. So that is one of the additional pieces that has been added to this final. Next slide, please. The town meeting had in November 2012 been asked, that we pay attention to Crocker Pond, and we have. There's been modeling both by SMAST and I should say confirmed by SMAST. And done through the town's consultant, which is GHD, and a sub-consultant who actually does the modeling for the Cape. And it is very clear that Site 7 does not discharge to West Falmouth watershed. We also had a number of studies done, soil borings, because phosphorus can travel through soils, and this was a question of whether we had soils in a condition that would retain the phosphorus. And the answer is that it is not an issue in Crocker Pond. Freshwater ponds are phosphorus limited, so when you add additional phosphorus, you get biological activity. Nitrogen is the problem in saltwater. We also noticed in our study that there actually is a very large discharge from Route 28A into Crocker Pond. Mass DOT actually has an easement to discharge to its stormwater, and that it would be clearly a factor in degrading the pond. And so the committee has sent a letter, and we coordinated through Julian to ask them what their plans are, because direct discharges to ponds now are not allowed. We have had additional studies done on Crocker Pond and modeling from Site 7, and those reports are going to be available tomorrow and will be the subject of our meeting on Thursday. There's a lot of technical information, and we recognize that the abutters have justified concerns, and so we're making it an agenda item on this Thursday. Next slide. This is looking forward. You have the document in front of you. Our next deadline is to submit the project evaluation form to the state for the state revolving fund. This gets you on the list. It does not commit to either a 0% or a 2% loan, but it lets the state know that we are far enough along in design for inlet of widening of Bourne's Pond, for collection system for Little Pond area, that we want them to begin thinking about how they would fund this project. Their deadline is August, and if you miss the boat, then you have to wait a whole nother year. The document that you have in front of you should go to the state no later than October 1st, and it sounded like, from what the chairman said, that we're going to be able to meet that schedule. We have basically 2 months to take in any other changes that are needed or clarifications, and to send it to the state. They will then have a public hearing, that's part of their process, and then they will issue what's called a secretary's certificate. In the meantime, we have a November town meeting, and the Water Quality Committee is going to bring to town meeting what I'm calling tools, that to the degree there are extra costs, what are the ways that we can reduce costs to the homeowners? The special legislation will be such tools as paying the betterment over 30 years. Right now the law is that it's 20 years. That it be paid as equal payments the way you do your mortgage. Right now it's descending payments. Checkerboarding is a tool that Matt Patrick has been encouraging the town to consider. It basically says if someone has an eco-toilet and is basically not on the sewer, that they should be exempted from the betterment that usually goes along with the collection system. The flow neutral bylaw is a requirement for a 0% loan. It is possible to get a state revolving fund loan for 2%, just, go through the process. But if you want a 0% loan, you have to meet a higher standard. And so we are having extensive discussions on a flow neutral bylaw, which basically says the amount of water that's being used in the sewer service area is what would be used in the future. There are lots of nuances to it, and there's still a great deal of discussion still to come. And then lastly, the betterment. We have road betterments, water betterments. This would be a sewer betterment. And the percentage is decided by town meeting. I understand that Jennifer Petit will help run some scenarios so we can see what the costs might be, but that will be a town meeting decision. In January, we expect to receive the Secretary's certificate, and then we have one more step in the hearing review process, and that is DRI, Development of Regional Impact, hearing before the Cape Cod Commission. All of this is part of the CWMP road that we have to go down. We hope to have all of this done by the time we come to town meeting with the request to authorize bonding for construction. This will be construction over several years, probably 3 years, and it will include the collection system, upgrade to the plant, the widening of Bourne's Pond, and if it looks like permeable reactive barriers are promising, then all of this we're going to bring to you as suggesting in terms of planning for bonding. And then, of course, in May, it also needs a vote from of the public. So that's the summary, and we'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions from the board?
My question is the T-Ticket school in the sewer area?
Yes.
It is. Okay. Well, I just wondered because I thought, I know there had been some considerations about closing a school. I mean, not by us, but by the school committee or by somebody, and that could have been a school that possibly might be. But I just wondered, this is, believe me, this is not factual. This is simply a, conversation that people had because they knew that the enrollment is going down. Should we close the school or not? There's been talk, let's put it that way, talk. So please don't get any rumors out there. You can talk about Schlitz beer, but don't talk about the T-ticket school being closed because
I can see the
it may
headline
not ever
already.
happen. Anyway, okay. Now, what about the ocean outfall? Is that still on the blotter to be considered, or?
Yes, the difficulty we've encountered, of course, in finding a land-based site to get rid of 260,000 gallons a day makes it clear that trying to find any further land-based sites for any sewer extensions or additions in this town or in any town in Cape Cod is arduous and almost impossible. So the outfall piece was in the version that you approved back in August a year ago, and it still is in this version. I will say that we've had conversations with different parties here. The elected officials tend to be a little bit nervous about it because they know the history of this. Interestingly enough, the scientists and even the Coalition for Buzzards Bay tend to be pretty enthusiastic because they understand the science. But right now there's a disconnect in the public mind and the political world mind about this, and it's going to take a while for everyone to get on the same page. If and when they do, that would be an option, but right now it isn't, except it is in the report as something that we're...
But it's still there.
Exactly.
It hasn't been removed.
Right.
Because I know even around the Cape, some of the other towns that work on this, the biggest problem they have is where to discharge, and there just isn't any land to discharge. So, and that you mentioned Site 7 in Crocker Pond. I know the bylaw that DAR, Department of Agriculture, Resources, MDARs they call it, is what they're currently working on in terms of a bylaw is phosphorus, not nitrogen. So that's kind of another reason why our bylaw had to get approved, because the state is really concentrating on phosphorus right now and not on nitrogen, or at least DAR is. And I guess that's what I wanted to say about the phosphorus, because it doesn't appear that Crocker Pond has an issue with phosphorus. Is that what you were saying?
Well, I was saying two things. Discharge from Site 7, the phosphorus is not going to impact Crocker Pond, okay? There are various levels in making that statement, and that's partly what we're going to be discussing on Thursday. But there's a minimum of 75 years of travel time, and that's under worst conditions, for anything from Site 7 to reach Crocker Pond. And then there are other steps that can be taken so that it's actually 1,000 years. So that's what I was talking about. There is some phosphorus in Crocker Pond now because there are a dozen houses that are upstream of it. There are about a half a dozen that actually directly abut the pond, and then there are another half dozen that are on the other side of 28A. And so some of their septic systems may be causing some phosphorus in Crocker Pond now. We have data that was collected by the county in 2007 and some years before that, and that did find a measurable amount of phosphorus in the pond. One of the recommendations in this volume is that we actually do start monitoring Crocker Pond now, so we have a current baseline, and whatever the conditions are in the pond now are going to be caused by the immediate abutters. The town clearly does not want to worsen the pond, and we won't.
Now, does our treatment plant discharge phosphorus at all? I mean, in any quantity that we should be concerned about?
The answer is yes, we discharge phosphorus. It's part of the effluent treatment. There is no damage to the groundwater. I looked at all of the groundwater data for every single monitoring well around the plant, and there is no phosphorus at all. Normally, phosphorus sticks to the grains of sand, as a sort of a layman's way of saying it. It doesn't travel, it doesn't move. There's a technical term, it's called adsorb, A-D-S-O-R-B. And once it sticks on, it usually stays there. So the plant, the current plant's been in operation for 36 years, and there is no phosphorus in the groundwater. So that's sort of another way of saying that we're pretty sure that Site 7 is not going to have a phosphorus problem.
Okay. So if this is all approved, then these projects like the inlet widening would occur sometime in 2014 or in the latter part of 2014 or even later, do you think?
Well, the timing is going to be different for each project.
For each one.
Spring of 2014 would be the town meeting vote and the voters' vote. So you're thinking if you were doing the sewer collection system, it would be spread out over 3 years, probably starting in 2015.
That's right.
And Boyne's Pond depends pretty much on how long the permitting takes, because the actual construction is not that big a deal, but the permitting is, because it's a very sensitive area with dunes and wetlands and everything else.
Okay, now my last comment relates to the betterment issue. I remember the old Silver Beach vote at town meeting when that betterment came up, and I believe it was 70-30, that the town paid 70% and the homeowner paid 30%, and there's really no designated ratio of who pays what, how much the town pays or how much other than the vote of town meeting. But I mean, is there some ideas about how that betterment might be allocated?
Well, there are
Like by you?
probably as many ideas as there are people who are going to pay for it or not pay for it. But it's one of the things that we're looking at in an organized way to see what other places do, to see what the actual impact on the homeowner would be in this particular instance at different betterment rates. You know, after you got the 0% loan and after you did a number of things to reduce the price. But the decision in the end will be yours to recommend to the town meeting and the town meeting to decide. But we're a long way from having a number.
We're not there yet. Now, what about public outreach on this? October 1st is the deadline, so we have to have this voted prior to that date, so it gets to the state by then. Is the opportunity for public outreach going to be your job or our job? Or
Well, the state has its own.
Or they have its own?
Requirement. The Cape Cod,
After it's filed?
After it's filed, that's correct.
the Cape Cod Commission has their own. You're welcome to have your own if you want it. It's hard, from our perspective, it's hard to believe this hasn't gotten a good deal of public scrutiny already between 2 town meetings and 2 voter referendums, but we're always happy to have more.
So I think that's probably something we'd want to consider between now and then before we voted, if we wanted to have any kind of an opportunity for the public to come in and just comment on it at that point.
Mr. Suso, you had something
If I
on
might
that?
just piggyback on that comment, just a suggestion that the board might want to consider requesting that the Board of Health and the Planning Board weigh in and make any recommendations they might deem appropriate to the Board of Selectmen prior to your taking final action on that. That would certainly be in order if you would so desire.
Okay.
Good idea.
Those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Certainly the jigsaw puzzle of the sewering area has been carefully thought out. Is there an easy way to describe to people why there are jigs instead of jags?
There's not an easy way, but there is a rationale for every single house lot as to why it's in and why it's out. Do you want to go through that in some detail?
Well, what is not shown on that slide is it would have been a blue line, which is on our town GIS maps, of what is the watershed for Little Pond. The DEP said that we needed to make this sewer service area encompass the watershed of Little Pond. And as we know, watersheds don't respect either roads or property lines. And so the line came like this. And we had had to run the pipes in the streets, and that's what led to the jigs and jags. And sometimes there was no street available, and so we had to move out another block in order to make sure that we had totally encompassed the watershed line. I didn't want to confuse this slide by putting the watershed line on. And then I should just say on the Great Pond side, the Little Pond watershed actually line is about here, and these few properties contribute to Great Pond, but it makes no sense to lay a sewer line and leave the last 3 houses at the end of the street, street after street, not included. So there's a small benefit to Great Pond in doing this. This area of jigs and jags, this is already sewered. And again, just so we didn't complicate things, we didn't show that. But this is already all on the sewer. So in effect, we are sewering all of the lower Little Pond watershed and a portion of the upper watershed. The amount of nitrogen that's going to be removed is going to bring us pretty close to what the standard is for the total maximum daily load. And we are hoping that the aquaculture will help us meet it, and so that it's sort of like it's a team effort to get this pond into good condition.
Thank you. That answers that actually very quickly and clearly.
Go ahead. Yeah.
As usual, thank you for your long work, and I think that now is almost at the time where we're really going to get into a lot of debate as we move forward with the public. And just to correct you, Pat, the betterment over in Silver Beach is 70-30, but I believe the residents paid 70%, the town paid 30%, the exact opposite, 70-30. Yeah, that's, yeah, the residents paid 70%, not the town. So that was the one that we have. I'm a little concerned as we want to move forward, and one of the issues that I'd like you to maybe address in your draft report is, in the background, you never mention anything about betterments before in town sewering. And I think that's important to put that in under 4.1, because we do have some background information about betterments that we did in New Silver Beach. So I think that would be important. You do address it a little bit further in the report under the financing still in item number 8. So that's fine, addressed there, but I think it's important to address where we are. I do have some questions and concerns about, and maybe you can answer them. You had 1,500 locations, but you're talking 1,700 betterments. In New Silver Beach, a betterment is well over $30,000. So I want to find out how you're going to be able to calculate that, and I'm not asking for an answer tonight, but when, we had people that were grandfathered in Silver Beach that had 4 bedrooms, that was a betterment. If they already had 5 bedrooms, that was a betterment. So those are some areas that I probably want to make sure I get some feedback from and questions.
Okay, 1,500 parcels, just.
Parcels.
Okay, we have not gotten into the issue of bedrooms yet. It's just, if you have a parcel with a house on it, it counts as 1. If you have a motel, and I actually was looking at Nate, who's from GHD, because they actually calculated the sewer equivalent units. So I don't know whether you can have any other information on that.
But you mentioned tonight it was 1,700. That's, I'm trying to wonder where you got that number
Right,
from.
that's, I think Nate has a better answer
Okay.
to handle on that one.
Hi, Nate Weeks from GHD, and Virginia covered it pretty well, or she touched upon it very well, there are some big water users in this area, and certainly they shouldn't be counted as a, single residential property. And typically what we do is we divide their flow by the typical flow from a residential property, and we give them a number of equivalents of properties. And so because there are some large water users in that area, particularly, some hotels and the mall and, some large commercial units, there is a greater equivalent number of sewer users than there are numbers of properties.
Right, but if I can give you an illustration, currently there are, I know, restaurants that are tied into the current system, and they pay very high, not so much water, but wastewater charges. So what you're saying is they might have multiple betterments based off of what they're used, besides what their current, yearly bill would be for wastewater?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, we're really just trying to give a sense of how many users are out there. And, it's easy to sort of look at several blocks of individual homes and say, well, each home is a user. But when you take a look at a large water user, we typically look at it and say, how many household equivalents is it? And it's just sort of a standard way of trying to get a sense of how many users would be out there and how it might be split up. And the actual details of how it could be split up are really yet to be delved into. And it does get to the issue of what might be a split between the general fund and betterments and those items.
Okay. Another question, we were talking about 400 homes that might benefit from the inlet widening. My question is, those 400 homes ultimately won't have to be put on the system. Are we looking for any kind of compensation from those homes? In other words, in some form of betterment? Because ultimately, they're going to have benefit avoidance by us, the town, doing a major inlet widening that could cost millions of dollars. Now, not the fact that I don't want to do that, but I'm looking for a fair and equitable way that we can address that as we move forward, because if they, at some point going up that, after the inlet widening, you're going to need to ultimately do something else. Where the line is drawn, the ones near the inlet widening had betterment avoidance, I guess is the best way for me to say that, versus their fellow neighbors who further up didn't have the ability to avoid the betterment. So I want to make sure that we address that as we move forward.
It's a good point, and we've been trying to get a fix on it because it is a fair point. But sort of one of the questions is, how do you say which 400 homes got the betterment or got the gain? And it's kind of hard to do that. And if you can't do that, it's kind of hard to make someone pay a betterment. So that's the difficulty with. But we're trying to. If it could be done, it would be appropriate. But we're not there yet legally to say that it could.
And I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade by any means. I really take my hat off for you folks working collaboratively with all of these different groups to be able to come up with a plan and narrow it back down. But I think the hardest part of this entire project is going to be this betterment issue. And I think that as a realist in this community, someone who's been here for, I'm not going to mention my age, that many years, knowing that that's where we're going to have some disagreements in this community. And I think we're being very optimistic, thinking we're going to accomplish that between now and November town meeting. I think building the project is going to be more easily accomplished than coming up with the betterment number.
On the Bourne's Pond Inlet, just to make sure I understand, the widening serves the same purpose from a nitrogen basis as sewering 400 homes, but it doesn't sewer the 400 homes, nor does it, if their cesspool fails, doesn't preclude them from having to put in a Title V.
That's correct.
So they're actually not getting any betterment in their house. It is really just the inlet that is losing the nitrogen. And so they might still have the sewer, they might still have to put in some of the system. They're not getting actually the benefit that a sewering does.
I don't disagree with you, but I think there's some folks out there that are going to chime in at that point in time.
No question about it. When you get to the question of who pays and how much, everyone will have an opinion that's going to reflect their own interest. We were pleasantly surprised entering into this with some trepidation about the folks who live in Mary Vista and that part of the Heights, and how enthused they would be about this kind of thing, since they were going to pay a piece of it, and a sizable piece of it. they've been very supportive. The Heights Mara Vista Association, which, as you know, has many issues over the years, they did not have an issue with this. Their board of directors unanimously supported the idea, knowing it was going to cost all their members some serious money. And in Mara Vista, we're getting the same reaction. People who own houses on 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 square foot lots know they need a sewer. And that's the big difference with this particular area compared to some others.
And I don't disagree with you, but I know that I still go over to New Silver Beach and people think they got the shaft because they paid 70% and the town only paid 30. That's where the people in Mara Vista need this. As a community, we need this. But the issue is, how much is the town going to pick up, or how much are the individual property owners going to pick up? And I don't know that right now, but I just think that we're being very optimistic to think we're going to solve this between now and fall town
We're
meeting.
hoping to leave that issue up to the Board of Selectmen.
Thank you very much.
Right, and along those lines, we certainly are. We're trying to develop as much useful information for you as we possibly can. And this obviously will be, I mean, it's everybody's pocketbook. The betterment does not have to be passed in November. We thought it was important to start the dialogue. And we are far enough along in the design that we begin to have, numbers we're reasonably comfortable with. Before that, it was just all over the map, and so everything was hypothetical, and hypothetical conversations don't move the town forward. You need facts and you need definite design. So it seemed appropriate to start the discussion in November, and we'll see where it ends up, and it can come back in the spring. The betterment doesn't actually have to be voted. I think we've got another year that we could actually wrangle over it.
Okay, thank you.
I have two issues. Earlier, there was a sentence said that T-Ticket School property is being used, and I think for the public, maybe it needs to say that it is just kind of a budding part of the property. I think that needs to be,
okay.
Because the sentence said it was
The sewer service area.
being
Do
built
we have the pump stations
at
on there?
T-Ticket School, and I,
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
You could point out where it is, though. It's not on the school property per se. It's a piece that the school owns that's off of Alphonse Street, which comes off of Route 28 near McDonald's. A very short street and quite a distance from the school, to say the least.
I just wanted you to say that because I think at another meeting it was explained that way, but this evening it sounded a little bit different to me, so thank you.
No, thank you.
And my second one is, how much are we utilizing the base? How much are we doing any kind of a connection where they abut Falmouth? I mean, are we over there looking at their wastewater plant, or is there, I just think it's an opportunity that most towns do not have because they don't abut that same area. And what are we looking at?
That has been looked at for about half a dozen years now. It's clear that the base has a plant that they'd like someone else to run. They have a discharge site that has potential. The committee before ours and the committee before, the review committee and this committee both looked at it and said Falmouth does not want to run two sewer plants. Falmouth has one that's a handful, and we don't need two. So the idea of taking over a fairly old plant, many miles from any area we ever hoped to sewer, made no sense to the previous committee or to this committee. The discharge site had some attraction to it since it wasn't in Falmouth, and it was already up and running. It's $10 million to get there, at least, and there's some question about how much capacity it would have available for us for Falmouth, and there was also the question of how much the base would want us to pay for the privilege of doing this, and there's also the question of, are they set up to make this offer? And the answer to all those questions was sufficiently unrealistic that we looked at everything and came back to the conclusion that for this particular sewer service area, the site that we have is going to have to do because it's affordable, it's ours, It's not very far away. I mean, for all those reasons, we're going with it in our recommendation.
I would just like to add a little bit of another idea, is that you have 138 acronyms. So I thought it was just like talking about Greek letters. And so as I looked at one, I said a committee meeting could be consisting of all you talk about is using acronyms. So I thought that was quite interesting in the glossary, and then I counted them.
It's been Greek to us, and fortunately we have somebody of Greek ancestry as a consultant. So.
I mean, it certainly is not something to memorize, but it's just such constant talk in every committee, and you just rattle them off, and I had to go and take a look.
In case you wondered why you didn't understand Jerry, that's the reason.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, too, that one thing that really struck me in reading this was the thread of adaptive management that runs through the whole plan. And I thought that was very, very significant, because in the past, it seems like the plans that we've come up with before, it's a plan, and then it has an end. It doesn't go anywhere after you come to the last page. But this one has adaptive management all the way through it. So you know it's a plan that's going to evolve over time, because as all these different processes are being monitored and evaluated, the plan is going to change along with that. So I just want to say that I think that's an incredible part of the plan, and a great job for doing it that way. Because I think it's a first. I've never seen a plan that just goes on and on and on, that we're going to have to work with it continuously, and it gets updated as opposed to put that on the shelf and let's start another one. So.
Any further questions or comments from the board? Anyone in the public have any questions or comments for the committee? All right. I have a couple of questions, and it's more to the question, the issue of the deadlines. One of the things that you folks had up there was August 15th, and then there was October 1st. Now, I know obviously we have to get approvals from the state. Are those self-imposed deadlines, or are those the hard deadlines that the state needs?
The August 15th deadline is a state deadline. If you want to be considered for the 0% loan, or even the 2%, you've got to get yourself on the list by August 15th. It's not a major rendition of the project, because you have to tell them what it is, and that's the August 15th, and that's a given.
So by August 15th, you'd need some sort of approval from the board to submit to the state for the revolving funds. I guess one of the questions that I'm getting at here is, we've talked about public feedback and public input. There's not a lot of time, obviously, between now and August 15th. We want to give the public the opportunity to review these documents and perhaps have another meeting such as this, where if anyone has any last comments or questions to come in. But then we want to give you folks time to respond as well, so there might potentially be a third meeting at some point for us to cast votes, unless, for example, in this situation, if we're applying for the revolving funds, can we apply, and if we needed to withdraw a request without prejudice? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, putting the list of ideas that you have for projects in on August 15th doesn't commit you to doing them at all.
Okay.
It just puts you on the list, and I think that Julian's been...
Julian's going to sign it.
Yeah.
So he's on the hook. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
I'm confident that the board could indeed withdraw at a later date if you chose to fine-tune that list further.
Okay.
But getting into the queue, I think, is critical, and I would encourage that.
Okay. So then the October deadline here for setting the final one, we would have to put our stamp of approval on these documents, and that needs to be done for the state's approval.
The October deadline is not a state deadline.
Okay.
We have back mapped from the April town meeting what needs to have been done so that when we come to town meeting, we have cleared the regulatory hurdles. We know that the plan is approved. We know that it's on the state list. And we have basically the guidelines or whatever conditions that the Cape Cod Commission is going to be interested in. And so in order to make that schedule to meet town meeting, this document needs to go into the state by October 1st.
Okay.
Okay, that's where that date came from.
So potentially at our, and for the board's discussion, I think for our next meeting in 2 weeks, we may have on the agenda the list of projects that we would approve to be sent to the state, because that would get us in advance of the August 15 deadline. But then we may still have after that, so that the public has the opportunity, that's simply submitting the list, and sometime between now, obviously, and October 1st, we may have 1 or 2 additional meetings, because of course, you know, Mr. Suso mentioned the idea of getting some recommendations or feedback from the Planning Board and the Board of Health. We obviously want to give them time to have any meetings to gather that information before we make final decisions.
I'd also become very comfortable knowing what our finance director and the town manager thinks about our funds as we move forward. One of the issues that we've always talked about is that the town also has capital needs as well.
Yeah.
We have a water filtration system. So for us to approve something that we know is not going to fit in this first year of lending, we may need to move forward with the water filtration. So maybe between now and then, the town manager can work with the finance director and get some kind of idea and plan of how we could proceed and what we could fit in that.
The town manager has been very forthcoming about the need for that, and we've been meeting about every other week with him and with the finance director and with the planning director and different town entities to make sure that the package that you ultimately receive has all their input. It's inclusive of you were quite clear when you were chairman, we were not going to be the only project on the town's agenda, and we recognize that, and we're talking about filtration, and we're talking about this together. And the financing will reflect the ability to do both of those.
And I want to be fair to the folks up in the state. I don't want to try to reserve money that another community could use the first year. In other words, that we're not going to use right away or something of that nature that we can get in line again. So.
Well, they won't be giving us any money until our town meeting and our voters tell them we have some. I would remind the board and the public that this document is basically a reiteration of the one you approved a year ago. There is nothing new in here except the updates in filling in the blanks, so to speak, of where we were a year ago and where we are now. But the plan is the same one that this board unanimously approved last August.
Jerry Thomas, the wastewater superintendent. The projects that we're going to go forward with are quite honestly the 3 projects that were briefed tonight. We have a collection system for Little Pond Sewer Service Area. That's around $44 million. We discussed that, whether it's 46 or 42. At this point, I won't say it's immaterial, but you know, you're within hand grenade range, where it's a few $1 million. The other project is Bond's Inlet widening. That's around $5 million. And the 3rd project is upgrades to the treatment plant. And that's going to be around $4.5 million. It's not going to be important to tweak those numbers at this point in time, as it is to lay out to the state. These are the 3 big areas we're coming in with, and justify those against their criteria, so we're as high up on the list of projects criteria-wise, and that they have an idea for funding. They know we're not going to go through $44 million in 1 year, and we'll come in with a phase funding of what we can afford. So it gets complicated, but if you look at the big picture, it's fairly straightforward. As far as your concern on betterments, this is always bad when you use arithmetic. If you go 44 million divided by 1,700 equivalent users, that takes you to about $24,000 if each equivalent user paid 100%, and that's probably not going to happen. And New Silver Beach came down to $27,000, because you had a good DPW director. and a very able wastewater superintendent. It was that high.
I just have one more comment on the nutrient management bylaw. That last Thursday, the Cape Cod Commission voted to nominate Cape Cod as the DCPC for the development of a nutrient management bylaw. They haven't had the public hearings on it yet, but the idea is to give each town the option of having their own management bylaw. Well, that the commission will adopt a nutrient management bylaw using Falmouth as the model for it. And then each town then can choose whether or not they want to opt in or opt out. So it's not a requirement. If they want to adopt that nutrient management bylaw, they can. If they want to do something totally different, they can. But at least it gets the process going. So I just thought you'd like to know that.
Any last questions, comments from the board?
No.
The public? All right, this is the first of many meetings over the next few months, and we'll see you folks again soon, I'm sure.
Well, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time and for your support.
Thank you.
This is a community project, and the board has been extremely supportive all along, and we appreciate that very much.
And I also want to recognize the review that Ray Jack did for us, too. I found that extremely helpful to kind of narrow it down and summarize it. It really helped to put it together, so we want to thank him for that.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is a discussion of the Zoning Board of Appeals request for special counsel. Mr. Suso, do you want to?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was a request that has come from the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I presume you would want them to make some presentation. I know Mr. McNamara, the TBA chair, is in attendance, and I would also expect some comments, if it's the desire of the board, from town council as well.
Okay. Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Matt McNamara, Chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And thank you for your time on this agenda item. As you know, it does surround the request for funds for substitute town council surrounding the decision that was made by the Zoning Board of Appeals regarding the nuisance matter at Neil Anderson's property regarding the wind turbines. If I can just quickly give you a brief chronology, we can all try to get on the same page, and then I'll just make a couple of brief points to consider. On May 20th of this year, the Zoning Board of Appeals filed its decision with the town clerk that the town-owned turbines were a nuisance at 211 Blacksmith Shop Road. On June 5th, the town of Falmouth, as the developer, owner, and operator of the wind turbines, filed a complaint in Barnstable Superior Court seeking to overturn the ZBA decision. The town of Falmouth named the town of Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals and its individual members as defendants, as well as Mr. Anderson and others. On June 10th, Mr. Duffy, as town council, had a summons served on each member of the Zoning Board of Appeals demanding an answer to the complaint within 20 days, or July 1st. On June 11th, the Zoning Board of Appeals asked Mr. Suso for the availability and procedure to access funds for substitute town council. On July 15th, the Zoning Board of Appeals had not had a response, either affirmative or negative. It therefore filed a request with the Finance Committee for a transfer of $20,000 from the reserve fund because at the time of preparing the 2014 budget, the ZBA did not anticipate being sued by the town of Falmouth, leaving it without representation. There is only $600 available in the ZBA budget for all technical and professional services that might be needed during the course of the year, but obviously not litigation. 2 days after our application, we were notified of being on your agenda tonight, so thank you for that. A couple of points that I'd like the board to consider To our knowledge, the ZBA and its members have never been left without legal representation prior to this decision that the town disfavors. In past occasions of a conflict of interest with Mr. Duffy's office, the town manager has authorized funds for special counsel. It is our understanding also that no other town board or the members have ever been left without legal representation, even in matters involving the town as an owner and a town regulatory board, for example, the Conservation Commission and the DPW. The ZBA has no interest whatsoever in presenting an affirmative defense in this case, but does need legal representation to deal with the myriad of motions and demands that can arise and evolve in this matter that are either initiated by the town as the plaintiff or other defendants. There should be no need for a litigation strategy that attempts to deny or limit funds for special counsel, or even to prohibit legal representation for the ZBA and its members. It is impossible to imagine any plaintiff having such power over a defendant, never mind volunteers that serve the town. Should the Board of Selectmen wish to consider creating a policy regarding funds for substitute town counsel in the instance of a conflict of interest, then I would suggest it should be done outside of the instance or the context of actual litigation. A fair policy is needed to prevent any appearance of punishment for a decision that might be disfavored by the town manager or the Board of Selectmen. A fair policy should or could involve a neutral party, such as the Finance Committee, or perhaps even the David Vieira as in his role at town meeting. State law and Falmouth bylaws required the Zoning Board of Appeals to make a decision in this matter. The individual members of the ZBA work hard on behalf of the town, and in this case expended a great deal of time and effort and acted responsibly as it does with every matter that comes before them. We're not talking about one renegade member abusing power, but a collective, well-thought-out decision made in open meetings. And as special municipal employees, I think we have an expectation of legal representation. Thank you.
Do we want to hear from...
Mr. Chairman, maybe I should just note that in the request that we ultimately received, it was for $20,000 to be considered by this board for special counsel purposes for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Just wanted to clarify that as well.
Mr. Duffy, would you like to enlighten us on some history of special counsel in these situations?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Frank Duffy. I'm town counsel. I'm here tonight not to ask you to deny funds to the Board of Appeals for special counsel in representing them in this litigation. I think we're here to talk about how much. It's a rather unusual situation when one town board files suit against another. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. Now, at this particular situation, the Board of Appeals made a finding at the request of Neil Anderson that Wind 1, and I think they mentioned Wind 2, in fact constituted a nuisance under the Falmouth zoning bylaw. And that word nuisance is a very important word because also there's also the concept of nuisance under the zoning bylaw. There is also the concept of nuisance in Massachusetts tort law. And as I have informed this board through the town manager some time ago, a number of people who live in the area of the wastewater treatment plant where Wind 1 and Wind 2 are located have filed notices of claims against the town seeking monetary damages, alleging there is a nuisance which has caused them losses and they're seeking compensation. Now, if you take all of the plaintiffs that have filed notices of claims, and in fact I think 2 of them have actually brought suit in the United States District Court in Boston, There are 25 notices of claims on record, which potentially exposes the town to $2.5 million in compensatory losses if these nuisance claims are proven. This is a matter which the town manager and I reported to the insurance company. They're aware of it. These claims are in fact covered by insurance, but nevertheless the town has an affirmative obligation to participate in the defense of these claims. So as Mr. McNamara explained, what happened here is you have a situation where Mr. Anderson filed a complaint with the building commissioner alleging that the operation of Wind 1 was a nuisance under the bylaw. His determination was that they were not. That determination was appealed to the Board of Appeals, and we had a long hearing before the Board of Appeals, and I will say that the Board of Appeals gave it their best effort. They tried very hard to come up with a decision in this particular case. They listened to a lot of evidence. They took testimony from a lot of people. And giving it a lot of thought, they came up with a decision that, no, the building commissioner was wrong and that they overturned him and made a finding that the wind turbines, in fact, did constitute a nuisance. We then, this board, made a decision to appeal that decision to the Superior Court. And a very unusual decision, one that you gave a lot of time and effort and consideration to. The problem that I see with the existence of the decision is that a finding by our own Zoning Board of Appeals that Wind 1 and Wind 2 constitute a nuisance is in fact evidence and can be used as leverage in the subsequent nuisance claims that have been presented to the town. Therefore, I recommended to the town that you take this action to appeal the Zoning Board of Appeals decision to the Superior Court. Now, we have situations like this in the past, and I'm going to read you a paragraph from a memorandum which I had previously delivered, but we have a policy in this town, and it's one that's been on the books for about 30 years, probably more. And it has to do with how we fund or how we treat legal representation or appeals of the Board of Appeals under certain circumstances. And I'm going to read it to you because I just want to make sure that I clearly explain it to everybody, including the people here in the room. When a party, in that case Mr. Anderson, appears before the Zoning Board of Appeals and seeks relief in the form of a special permit, variance, or other decision, and obtains the desired relief, and this relief is later challenged in court on appeal, the town requires that the original applicant bear the cost of defending the board's decision in his or her favor in subsequent litigation. As I said, this policy or practice has been in effect for at least 30 years, and it's consistent with a policy in many other communities around the state. We refer to them as the third-party action. It simply doesn't make any sense for the town to be funding litigation which really benefits private parties. Now, let me give you a couple of considerations. The Zoning Board of Appeals decision was based upon an application by Mr. Anderson, and it benefits Mr. Anderson, and it benefits his property. Therefore, by presenting an affirmative defense, or in this particular case, there would be using public funds for the benefit of a particular private individual. Now, I heard Mr. McNamara say tonight that he does not want to present an affirmative defense, and I'm glad we hear that, because I think we're on the same page in that respect.
And it's not, but by the way, it's the Zoning Board of Appeals.
What did they say?
You said Mr. McNamara.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. The Zoning Board of Appeals has no legal interest in the decision that it made. It made the decision. It is now stepping aside and letting some other forum decide the question. The ZBA simply made this decision at the benefit, at the request and for the benefit of others. This is a decision that it made. It never would have been made unless a complaint had been filed with it. The members of the Zoning Board of Appeals are named in this particular case as defendants, and they're required to by statute for the purpose of giving the court jurisdiction to hear the appeal. I want to make it absolutely clear that the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals are not named in their individual capacity. There is no possibility that any judgment will be entered against them individually, and they will not be at personal risk, nor will their property be at personal risk, and there'll be no financial risk to them in this litigation. In the Superior Court, a zoning appeal of this nature is heard de novo, and by that I mean you start all over again from scratch. Consider, for example, that you have a hearing before the judge in Superior Court, which is exactly the same and identical to the hearing you had in the Board of Appeals. The judge acts as the Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals actually has no role in presenting evidence in the particular case because it was the judge at the previous level. So the evidence that is presented in this case is presented by the real parties in interest. The real parties in interest are Mr. Anderson and the town of Falmouth. So I'm suggesting to you that under the circumstance it is fair and equitable to allow the people who filed the original application with the zoning board for relief to bear the cost of defending the relief that the board gave them. In reality, there's very little for counsel of the Board of Appeals to do in this particular situation. Now, I fully understand and I appreciate the comments that Mr. McNamara made earlier. His board is a very good board. It has done a very good job on many cases, including this one. These people took this very seriously. They gave this matter a lot of consideration, and I applaud them for that. And it's no fun getting sued. He referenced the fact that they were served with a subpoena. That's not any fun. It's happened to me a few times. We should not leave the Board of Appeals without representation. We should do it. And they deserve it as special municipal employees. The question is how much, and I'll have a recommendation for you in a minute. But for these reasons, this is a dispute that should be carried out before the people who brought the original application to the Board of Appeals and the town of Falmouth is the owner of the wind turbines. I have a proposed motion which I will read. I think the town manager may have circulated a copy to you earlier. But I move a motion that the Board of Selectmen approve the sum of $2,500 to fund the appointment of special counsel to the Board of Appeals in the case of Town of Falmouth versus Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals et al., Barnstable Superior Court, case number 213281. Subject to the following conditions. 1, special counsel shall be engaged by written agreement for legal services approved and signed by the town manager. 2, special counsel shall represent the interests of the Board of Appeals and its members individually. 3, special counsel shall not be responsible for or actively participate in the presentation of the applicant's case for nuisance before the court. Now, I just would like to address a couple of points briefly that Mr. McNamara raised. There really isn't much to do as for the Board of Appeals in this particular litigation. In zoning appeals, no answer is required, so there's no requirement that the board file an answer. There is discovery. Mr. McNamara referred to it. There are such things as motions or interrogatories or depositions. These are things that are normally filed by the opposing party. If you think about it, who's the opposing party? It is us. It is the town of Falmouth. I have no interest in deposing members of the Board of Appeals. I have no interest in submitting interrogatories to them. I have no interest in making their life in any way difficult. This is simply a case where they should be on the sideline watching the proceedings rather than actively participating. But at the same time, they should have adequate legal representation for the assurance that they don't personally suffer any adverse consequences from this case. I personally do not believe that this is a question of punishing the Board of Appeals for its decision. I would never suggest that we do that. The Board of Appeals performs a very valuable function in this town, and they should be applauded for the good work they do. This is simply a situation where I think the facts do not warrant their active involvement in the defense of this case. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. First of all, the fact that the town took the legal action was not any part of our request or presentation. I can understand it completely as a lawyer. I would have recommended that you do the same thing. So it comes down to the amount of money. And quite honestly, I'm somewhat surprised by $2,500 because I'm not sure you can get a whole lot of clerical work for the $2,500. And this is where I know it gets difficult for you. You're the plaintiff. This is plaintiff's counsel. We did talk to a lawyer. We got a recommendation of a range between $10,000 to $20,000. And I presented that information to Julian. This, by the way, Mark Bobrowski, who is the lawyer that has represented the Zoning Board of Appeals before, and in fact represented the Zoning Board of Appeals in the very special permit the Zoning Board of Appeals, or I'm sorry, the appeal that the Board of Appeals upheld the building commissioner, saying that there was no need for a special permit. So he's not biased one way or the other, but he's saying due to the level of activity, and it could be less. It depends, and I think what I put in the letter to Julian, I know that you have copies of it because I saw you with them, and it depends on how hard the other parties push. Now, as you know, again, as a lawyer, and Frank as a lawyer, sometimes we even ourselves get a little bit surprised when somebody knocks on your door and serves you with something. But you know, the board shouldn't have to go through that, whether it's the service for a request for production of documents, whether it's the service for interrogatories, admissions, whatever it is, we shouldn't have to be, as uncompensated folks that put a lot of time in on behalf of the citizens of this town, be limited to something which, quite frankly, would, I think, be clerical costs at best. Now, you've seen a lot of litigation fees approved by your board and seen expended by this town. We're not going to go spend $20,000. That doesn't happen. There are safeguards. The town accountant, forgive me, we don't have one right now, the director of finance would review every invoice that comes in. In the past, when this board has had special counsel because there's been a conflict of interest with town council's office, those invoices have been submitted. And in the past, we've used Mark Antine, who happens to be town council for another community. Mark Bobrowski has been used on a number of occasions. You know, and I mention that because I don't mind saying who the lawyers are. But here you have your town council, your legal representative say, $25 enough. The person that we consulted with said anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. There's pretty much a gap there, and it seems to me that if you limit the board to $2,500, then I don't know what else to call it, other than you didn't like the decision and it is punishment, because then each individual board member is going to have to be dealing with it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, well, questions from the board?
Well, I don't have a question, but, you know, in listening to Chairman McNamara's comments, I think, and in reading all of the information that we've had here, and listening to Mr. Duffy explain how this is a very unique situation. This is not, it's not very often that you end up in a situation where when you appeal a decision, it becomes a de novo type hearing. In other words, it's as if the Zoning Board of Appeals had never acted upon this. And now if the applicant, Mr. Anderson and others, and I'm not sure who they all were, chooses to take this forward to court, the Zoning Board of Appeals doesn't really have any role in this, from what I understand. This is the applicant going before a judge, essentially making his or her same case as was made to the ZBA to a judge. And the town is involved because the town appealed it. But the ZBA has no further role in this unless the counsel for the town or counsel for, or the judge, actually, would request information. So, I mean, I believe that we need to support our board and our board members in any case, and this case, in every case, and never leave them hanging out there without any proper legal counsel. I don't think this board would ever do that, and I don't think that's our intent. But from our understanding of this case and how it moves forward, because it's so unlike any other case where when a decision is appealed, you become a defendant, but in this case, you are not a defendant. In fact, you are not even part of the case going forward. So, so I think what we want to do, based on the advice we've had from council, is absolutely support the board and the zoning board and its members, but to be reasonable in that request. And if there are anytime there are additional funds that are going to be required for a specific reason, that we would hear that and respond to that. But based on what we're hearing now is right at this point in time, there is no reason for the ZBA, and remember, it's not the board, it's individuals of the board, rather than the board itself, that there's no occasion, based on the information we have, for the board to even be that concerned at this point. Maybe I'm not, maybe you can say it better.
Well, actually, what I'm hearing is if there's no occasion for them to be spending the money, it doesn't make any difference if we grant them $50,000, $60,000, because they're not going to need to use it. And so in good faith, I could see, why don't we grant more, because we don't believe they're going to need it. We really believe the case that's being put forward is between the town and Anderson, not with the Board of Appeals. And if we need to put some extra money in good faith to say we support the individuals, I actually don't have a problem saying, let's up it, I'm not sure where we go, but saying, we don't think there's that much cost out there, and we, in good faith, think we can say the numbers. They know they have our support by saying we're going to put more money there available.
But I guess, if I may, we would have to know that we have that amount of money available. I mean, we couldn't say we would support that amount of money unless we know we have it. And I don't know what that budget has in it right now.
Mr. Murphy?
With all due respect, we're dealing with two lawyers, and I would never ask a lawyer, what are you going to charge me up front? I mean, I'd want a defined thing, giving me an estimate. My question to either one of you would be, because the Andersons, at least that's what I believe, have the onus on them to present their case, what in fact would an attorney be doing to represent the Zoning Board of Appeals? You're not actually being sued. They're going to present to a different Zoning Board of Appeals, i.e. Superior Court. So my question is, what would an attorney be necessary for?
Sure. I think it's a good question. I mean, let's just turn it around and say the Board of Selectmen got sued, and you got sued individually for whatever reason it might be. And you got served with a request for admissions or interrogatories or whatever it might be. You would expect somebody else to review that information and to respond on your behalf. Maybe to talk to you, whatever it might be. But it shouldn't be the individual board member. It shouldn't be you as a board member on the Board of Selectmen that has to turn around and read that document, respond to it, file it with the court, submit it to all of the other parties that are involved. That's what a lawyer does. And you shouldn't have to worry about dealing with that on your own, waiting for the doorbell to ring, waiting for something to show up in your mailbox that you turn around and then have to be concerned about. Most people aren't used to that type of situation, but it is something that lawyers do routinely. Now, and I appreciate, Mr. Jones's sentiment. The individual members just shouldn't have to keep coming back to the plaintiff in this case, the town, and saying, give us a little bit of extra money, or approve whatever the lawyer has done before you do something more. You're the folks that have sued us. It just doesn't seem right. And in a situation, and I mentioned that we had hired Mark Antine previously, this was a case that the town didn't have an interest. It was over on Pin Oak Way. There was a conflict of interest because Mr. DeWitt, who was previously the assistant town council, had sued us, and Mark Antine was in court when there were court hearings. He responded to all of the actions. Quite frankly, what's interesting is that in all of the cases that the Zoning Board of Appeals have got sued in the past, they haven't had to look at anything. Town council has either done it by filing an appearance in court, first of all, so that all of the other parties would respond to that lawyer, not the individual members. So that's the first thing that they do. And so when they get everything and they review it, of course they charge for it. I'm not going to defend what legal fees are or not, but I'm sure that when Mr. Duffy has represented the Zoning Board of Appeals in these matters, the value of his time has been greater than $2,500. I mean, I'm sure of that. So, I mean, it's very difficult to sit here or to stand here and say, well, we'll put a dollar limit on it because anything that goes over that, then the individual board members will have to deal with on their own. It's not how it works. If you file an appearance in court to say you're the lawyer representing the individual members, the court and all of the other parties are going to continue to contact that lawyer. You can't say, we file an appearance up into a $2,500 limit and then go back and notify all of the individual board members or file requests from them. It's not the way it works. It seemed like such a benign request other than the fact that you were suing us. It's happened before. It hasn't been approved by the Board of Selectmen before. It's been something that the town manager's office has said there's a conflict of interest, we'll approve it. By the way, if there is a 30 or 40-year-old policy on these things, to the best of my knowledge, it's not in writing, and it's never been presented to the Board of Appeals before, but then we haven't had to worry about it because we have never been without representation before. That's all we're asking. Just give us what we're used to, that somebody, and it can't be Frank at this point because he's your lawyer, somebody will stand up, file an appearance, respond to anything that comes from any of the parties, including you folks. Thank you.
I guess.
Excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to say, I didn't think the ZBA is a party to this.
That's right.
That
Of
was my
course we
question.
are. We're named. Have you not seen the cover sheet? Town of Falmouth versus the Town of Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals. Matthew McNamara, David
Yeah, I
Haddad,
understand.
Scott Zelinski.
But from town council, my understanding was from council that in this de novo hearing now, it has to do with your decision, but that you are not a party to this process.
I don't want to speak to Frank. We are a party to this lawsuit, Pat. We are not presenting an affirmative defense. We're not interested in doing that. We're not going to go into court with counsel saying nuisance means the following things, et cetera. We're passively sitting back. But if you could think of a lawsuit as being passive,
Mr. Mac, I'm going to stop
I'm
everybody right here
apologize.
because I think at this point what I'm hearing is everybody seems to agree that we need to have a special counsel for the ZBA. They do have to have their interests represented. Mr. McNamara makes the point, and I think we all agree that if for some reason there's documentation or reason, and of course we've been served in the past for various lawsuits, and we've had town council represent us and answer these documents and these requests on our behalf, and I think that's exactly what Mr. McNamara and the ZBA are asking for here. I think we're all in agreement there. The question is the dollar amount. Town council has recommended $2,500. The ZBA has asked for $10,000 to $20,000. Where obviously there's a disagreement there in terms of what we think is necessary. Mr. Jones has suggested we give a larger amount in good faith because, as noted, they may not need it, therefore it's simply a good faith measure. Mr. McNamara has suggested that it might be a little cumbersome, if not inappropriate, to keep coming back and asking for more money on repeated occasions if it is needed, if more than $2,500 is needed. Let's try to come to something here and move this along.
I would say that I'm going to follow Mr. Duffy's recommendation for the $2,500 because I believe this is very complicated, and as I have read it several times, I am at the point that the ZBA will not actually in person be part of the court hearing, and that what you may need is any type of advice previous to that, and it doesn't amount to $10,000, $20,000. So I'm following Mr. Duffy's advice and explaining to me how this procedure is going to happen, and that we should afford $2,500 to the ZBA.
Anyone else?
Well, could we ask, would it be appropriate to have Mr. Duffy confirm perhaps that the ZBA is not a party to this? Are they or are they not? If they are, then that's, I know they've been served documents, but that doesn't necessarily, I'm not going to say anything. Can we ask him that question?
They are a party to the lawsuit.
They are.
What I have told you is they do not have any specific duties and responsibilities here that's going to merit $10,000 to $20,000 worth of legal fees.
Hey, Mr. Duffy, in consideration of the fact that you are obviously the town's lawyer in this situation and our representation, do you anticipate having to serve or any papers or make any requests of the ZBA or the individual members of the ZBA that would warrant any substantial financial interest on their part in terms of a defense or?
I do not anticipate doing it. I do not plan on doing it. If it comes up, it's only because of something that's unforeseen, and that would have to be addressed at that point. But I presently have no intention of doing so.
I guess to clarify, your recommendation of $2,500 is you don't think there'd be a need for more than that money to protect the individual interests on the ZBA.
And it's in my particular motion, which I read to you earlier, that one of the things to it, they are not being sued individually, they're being sued as members of the Board of Appeals. They're not at financial risk here. So that the amount of money spent would be on just Board of Appeals business.
But I could still understand an individual member of the Board of Appeal wanting advice on a legal issue.
Yes, and that's why, yes, I understand.
If they get a legal paper, they're not lawyers. Mr. McNamara is,
No,
but there are other
no,
people on the board who are
and-
not lawyers and who may not understand what this document is, and before they do anything, want to have a chance.
And I would not deny them that right.
Right. And I'm just saying that, in your belief, that will add up to $2,500.
I think that's a reasonable amount at the present time looking forward. Yes, I do.
And, I can still go back to what I said before. If that's what the advice is, I don't see a problem with having being more available on the table, because we just don't believe it's going to be spent. But to give good faith to the people who do give a ton of hours as volunteers.
And I would tend to agree with you, Mr. Jones, because if $2,500 is all we anticipate spending, in a good faith measure saying, well, let's put $10,000 on the table, just so that it can give the ZBA that comfort that they don't have to keep coming back to us and begging for money. And just to make the point, I can understand why Mr. McNamara might be a little uncomfortable right now, obviously, because here we are asking town council for advice about a dollar figure, and it's town council that's named the ZBA in this lawsuit, so I can understand his concerns about the conflict of interest. We may need to take that into consideration, obviously, when we look at this and say, well, town council's recommended $2,500. The good faith measure might be a good idea to up that so that the question of conflict of interest can be mollified, I guess, if nothing, for lack of a better word.
There is nothing more than I hate than when you walk in to buy a new car and they say, how much have you got to spend? I mean, it's the worst case scenario. And quite candidly, later tonight, we had appropriated some funds under the summary of actions. We're going to come back and we're going to go over the amount of money that we appropriated for some legal action. We're coming back to fund that. Same scenario that we've done on many occasions. But, so I don't think that originally appropriating $2,500. Again, someone's got to be the watchkeeper of the town's funds. It's not that, and I think it's appropriate, the chief procurement officer, who is the town manager, is the one that ultimately signs off on that. If there is additional funds and there's additional needs, they can come back to the Board of Selectmen. But to walk in and say, we got 10 grand, I'll tell you what, I'll figure a way that you can spend it. You know what I mean? That's the bottom line. So I don't want to leave anyone high and dry. I surely understand that no one likes getting a summons on behalf of the town, because each and every one of us have got one of those. And, I think that we need to be prudent with the taxpayers' dollars and move forward on that. And if there is additional needs for additional funds, feel free to come back to the Board of Selectmen. I would encourage it. So I don't think that, at this time, that there's any justification for the, just to come up with a balloon amount of money and say, well, you have that to spend, go ahead and spend it if you need to. I think that we'll give you an appropriate sum of money that was recommended by our council, that has a history of being funded in that sense in the past, and if we need more money, we'll come back to it. Unfortunately, it's going to be Mr. Anderson's responsibility to present the case. I think you've even noted that, and the ZBA realizes that it is, his responsibility to present a case before Superior Court. So that's where I would come.
Mr. Haddad, I think, would like to say a few words.
David Haddad, I'm a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Pat and Mr. Jones, they hit the nail on the head. Pat said, what would be the proper thing? If the Zoning Board of Appeals feels $20,000 is the proper thing, I don't see why that shouldn't be put out there. As Matt said, the finance director can go over the invoices or whatnot and, see if it's justified. We're not just going to blow 20 grand. And it would give me a level of comfort knowing there's an attorney properly representing me. So I don't see why 20 grand's a problem.
I'm not going to be taking any public comment. This is really for the board to hash out this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, one last comment. I think we're beating this one to death.
No, that's fine. I don't think, Kevin, it's like $20,000 we write a check to some lawyer. There's actually, if I remember correctly, $135,000 in town council's account for special counsel. That's what we've accessed before. That's what Julian had suggested. That'd be like saying Frank's going to spend $135,000 just because it's in his account. All we're asking for is authorization to use an amount of money to represent the board as need be. Even Frank said, at this point, we don't anticipate. But if something comes up, he said, we might. We don't know. You're in charge of what comes up in many respects. We're not. And because Neil Anderson may do something, we get served with it as well. It's not just Frank. We're not asking Neil Anderson what he's going to do in terms of his defense. He may very well do things that Frank doesn't anticipate doing, and each of us gets served with those items. So thank you for your consideration.
I actually have a great deal of faith that the Board of Appeals, either individually or collectively, will not do their best to spend every dollar that we possibly give them. I would move that we, I'm not sure where the money comes from, but if there is in the special counsel of $10,000, please put aside for the ZBA for this purpose.
So we have a motion to approve the request and to make it $10,000. So
with the conditions, I would like to, that Frank had put forth.
There's a motion here.
would you then propose using this motion, but simply to state $10,000 as opposed to $2,500?
Yep.
All right, so we'll use the motion that we have in our documentation. That'll be for the record.
There isn't a second yet.
There is no second at this point. Anyone choose to second it? I'll second it for discussion. Obviously, if there's no second, so the question is why are we going to quibble over 10,000 versus 2,500? Let's move this along. That's my 2 cents.
I just think that they can come back if they need, circumstances change. And they come back to the Board of Selectmen and ask for.
Do we want to have another half an hour conversation like this in 3 months?
I'll make a motion that we approve the motion with $2,500.
Well, no, we already have a motion on the table, so we have to.
Oh, okay.
Deal with this and move on, so. Any further discussion on the motion?
Well, why don't we try to negotiate the motion rather than, maybe not have it passed? I mean, we've all agreed that we are going to support the Zoning Board of Appeals. Where they need counsel, we have agreed that we're going to provide that counsel. Whether we need to allocate $10,000 or $20,000 when town council, who is going to be the litigator in a sense, with Mr. Anderson, if in fact this is filed with Superior Court, and may already have been, I don't know. We're voting something that we don't know. And I agree with Kevin to a point where if you need more money, I'd be comfortable with $5,000 to start with. I mean, I think that's, when you don't have anything in front of you right now, then why go more than that? See what $5,000 will do, if in fact there is a need. And right now, it doesn't appear that there is a need for council because there has been no representation as yet.
If that had a better chance of succeeding, I'd be happy to amend my motion to 5,000.
Okay, so the motion's been amended to 5,000.
I'll second that.
And it's been seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
No.
Motion carries 3-2. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman, could I confirm, does the language
Oh, we have
of
to
Frank's
vote the motion.
suggestion, is that included in the motion?
I think we.
Yes.
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 So essentially, it was what the board voted was the proposed motion that town council had provided us, but with the sum of $5,000.
I think we should read it, though, so everyone knows what
So
the
the motion was
is.
to approve the sum of $5,000 to fund the appointment of special counsel to the Board of Appeals in the case of Town of Falmouth versus Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals et al., Barnstable Superior Court Case Number 213-281, subject to the following conditions. Special counsel shall be engaged by a written agreement for legal services approved and signed by the town manager. Special counsel shall represent the interests of the Board of Appeals and its members individually, and special counsel shall not be responsible for or actively participate in presentation of the applicant's case for nuisance before the court.
So that is the motion.
That was the motion voted. All right. We have application for change of ownership. This is Subway 236 T-Ticket Highway. Is the applicant or the applicant's representative present?
Christopher Craig, General Manager for Subways on the Cape here for the owners.
Okay. Good afternoon, or good evening, excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, we do
Yes.
have a note from the Falmouth Police Department. The department has no problem with this request.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
I think we also have a note from the Health Department that they have not yet been contacted by the new owner. Have you yet contacted the Health Department?
I haven't personally, but
You-
I don't know if the owners have or not. I'm
Oh.
assuming they have. I don't know
think
that.
somebody needs to, because you're going to need permits to operate from the Board of Health.
Right.
And even if we approve the change of ownership, you won't be able to begin operations until you have those permits.
Oh,
from
I
the Board of-
understand.
Oh, you understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
And I move approval with the condition that the Board of Health is contacted and the appropriate permits received before this is issued.
Okay. We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
Good luck.
Unanimous.
Nice place.
Thank you.
Good food. I like Subway.
All right. Next item on our agenda, Spring Bars Road Planning Board comments and next steps. This was added to our agenda to see if the board would like to have any comments or questions based on the planning board's comments that it sent to the Cape Cod Commission for the Spring Bars Road project, the planning it. If we don't desire to add any feedback or comments, we can let the planning board know that. If we do, we can, I guess it's the question as to whether the board wants to have a discussion about it or send individual comments.
I don't have any other additional comments. I think we had a lot of conversation with the planning board and with the Community Preservation Committee, and I don't have anything to add.
Anyone else?
I agree with Pat. We had a public comment period that evening, and I'm satisfied with that.
guess I do have a concern. I felt I'm in much more support of this project than I think the planning board came across. And I think the planning board was really very negative about the possibility because of the flood zones. I understand those concerns. I thought that actually the CPC had come up with some ways of trying to mitigate those with different constructions in different areas of the town and different areas of the plot. And I would worry that the word from both boards were lack of support. And I felt the planning board very much was against it, and I wasn't sure that we had come across as a board of either supporting it or not supporting it that evening. Certainly the planning board spoke a lot more than we did. Just as an individual, I would want to make sure that my support for the project, moving forward the way the town meeting voted, really had a chance of succeeding.
Kevin?
I think where the comments are based on the Cape Cod Commission's report. Our comments, and we're going to be the ones who ultimately will make a decision. I think we gave them input, and we asked for their advice and their help. They're going to provide us a report. It is ultimately going to be our responsibility to make some final decisions along with town meeting. So I don't think there's anything else we can say. We don't want them to say, change it, because we want to make ourselves look good if we make this decision. I think that it's necessary to, let the cards fall where we may. We gave some public comment. We asked for their assistance. They have some expertise. Let them bring it forward, and then we'll weigh it as a board ultimately. I agree with you.
I agree. I just wanted to make that.
Well, I just wanted to say that a lot of those negative comments that came from the planning board, as you mentioned, that came as a result of those FEMA regs that had not even actually been promulgated. In fact, I don't think FEMA has even had their public reviews of those new regulations yet either. So I think you go forward with the projects that you have, and then if at some point, as you go through the process, then there's more information from FEMA and certain hoops have to be jumped through because of changes to the regulations, then that's just going to be part of the process. But I agree that it got to be fairly negative toward the end, and that was unfortunate in some respects. I mean, we know what the FEMA regulations do. They're raising that threshold, and it will have an effect on the project, I'm sure, in some way or other. But us not moving forward with it isn't going to change that.
No. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm getting a general feeling from the board that we're satisfied with what's been presented, and we don't need to have any additional comment. Okay. All right. Then there's no action required. Next on our agenda, the email response protocol. This is one of the things that the board discussed during our retreat, and Mr. Jones has kindly followed through on his action item here and has some recommended responses for the board to consider.
And so the basic premise is that this is an attempt to make sure that all emails are responded to and that we know who's responding to. And so this would be for emails that were sent to the entire board, that I would forward the majority of them either to Julian or to a department head, depending on what made sense. I think most of the time it would just be to Julian, who would then himself forward it to a department head. But just making sure people got that response. Others, I would mention that it's on the agenda, on an agenda item coming up the next month or so, and give them the date of that. And the third possibility would be, this is something that we'll look into and get back to them on. It would give the opportunity for individual selectmen, if they wanted to respond to an email, they could do that personally, or they could forward it to the entire board, at which point it would fall into the category of, the same category as the ones I mentioned earlier.
Well, my general feeling is that if one person is designated to do it, then one person does it and the rest of it stay out, because that just complicates it. And I think since we really are not by charter supposed to get involved in the operations, that forwarding it to the town manager is the way to go. And then with a little statement at the end that might say, if you haven't received any satisfaction within the next 10 days, let me know. And let it go at that. And then if Julian thinks it's something that maybe the board should take up, he can recommend it to the chairman. But I think you just, say to the person you have forwarded to the town manager, and you should expect a response in a reasonable time or whatever. If you are not satisfied with your response, please let me know. And
Yeah,
that
well,
ends it. And the rest of us don't do anything.
And I agree with you, Pat. I think the appropriate, rather than send it to a department head, Julian's the quarterback. The town charter states that. He's the only one who actually works for us, and we pass it on to the town manager, and then he passes it on to assistant town manager or whatever department head. And there's another email about the chairman. I don't think we need to address anything for agenda items. It's just basically, we've received your information, and we'll pass it on to the town manager. Town manager would also be the one maybe to bring it to the chairman's attention if he thought something were appropriate to put on as an agenda item.
Could I limit this to emails we receive from residents and taxpayers, as opposed to, there are also emails that we all receive on an almost daily basis from people who live.
Oh, you mean like Ron Beatty and Eric Bibler and
Right.
people like that? I just don't even respond to them.
I delete them.
Yeah, you can't.
They're not my constituents, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So I think
You'd have to
constituents
kind-
emails are the ones I.
Constituency emails, not emails that are just sent out as general information.
Right, because
think
most
it's-
likely Julian's already got the email.
Yeah. I think an example is the lady that talked about the dogs in Beebe Woods. I think that was one of the first times, and I thought, what do you do when someone sends this? So I like just exactly what Kevin said.
Okay.
It's one statement, and it's that type of an action. I mean, I'm using that as an example in comparison to what we just mentioned.
I hate to say it, but it's almost an away message, but we're actually forwarding it to the town manager.
I understand the direction.
And the other thing is, it gets a response quickly, so the person is, even though they don't get their answer, but they get a response. And then they know that they can expect another response from either Julian or someone that is responding to their email, however he directs to make the final response in a reasonable period of time.
Then I'll work out the exact wording with Mr.
Yeah.
Suso.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
that will be great. And then and then the response, when you copy all of us, then we know there's been a response, and then we can just not worry about it. Good, well, that was easy.
Progress on that front.
Everything should be so
Very good.
easy, right?
Thank you all. And next on our agenda, minutes of meetings. We have minutes here for the July 15 public session.
I move approval of the minutes of Monday, June 15th.
Second?
A motion and a second for approval of the minutes as presented. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous. We have no executive sessions minutes to address this evening. So we will move on to the summary of actions.
And we're still in our old plan for summary of actions,
Yes.
where we are holding tonight as opposed to 3 or 4 days ago, right?
Correct. The town council and the town manager are still working out the details of the cursory approvals, so at this point...
But before, I'm going to try to save some time in the summary of
Okay.
actions. And that would be that because there are some one-day liquor licenses in the summary of actions, I want to make a disclosure that I'm the holder of an all-alcoholic seasonal liquor license versus hold each and every one. Okay.
That's great.
And in the interest of time, I'll just speed through these. If anyone wants to hold one, just let me know. We have, sorry?
I was going to hold one.
Oh, okay, so we'll hold number 1, which is Zuma Race Revised Race Route, that will be held. We have number 2, request for special event, Children's Carnival, Falmouth Fireworks Fundraiser at Fuller Field, August 5th through August 7th of 2013. Number 3, request for a special event, we're going to hold that. Number 4, request for special event, East Falmouth Village Association Minot Beach Party, August 17, 2013. Number 5, request for special event, Main Street Mile Road Race, Village Green to Surf Drive Beach House, September 8, 2013. Number 6, request for one-day liquor license, the Samaritans on the Cape Cod and the Islands, 6th Annual Bocce Festival, Falmouth Academy, September 21, 2013. Number 7, request for one-day liquor license, Wacoit Bay Reserve Foundation at Webner, August 8, 2013. Item number 8, additional funding authorization for legal work, McKenna and Associates. I'm going to hold that one myself. Number 9, donation to the Beach Department donation account, $600 from the Silver Beach Improvement Association. Number 10, short-term extension of the Human Services Office lease. Number 11, appoint Veterans
Hold.
Council committee members. We will hold that one. Number 12, request for special event. We will hold that one. Number 13, request for use of Old Silver Beach resident parking lot, New Balance Falmouth Road Race, August 11, 2013, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Mine says 9.
I'm sorry, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. My apologies. So, a motion then, please, for items number 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 13.
So moved.
Second?
There,
We're in tandem
jinxing
here.
somewhere like that. We have a motion and a second for the approval. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? All right, item number 1, Mr. Murphy, you held this.
The Zuma race, I just wanted to make sure that folks were aware that this is for an actual road closing, which we've never had before.
Oh, yeah.
So, in other words, this is an updated plan, but there are many dead-end roads off of Quaker Road. And I think it's important that the public know that, and those folks on those roads know that as well. Not just 3 days before, but there are a lot of folks that might be trying to go to work and things of that nature. I realize it's for only 20 minutes, but I wanted to make sure that folks knew that we are addressing this and that we know this. I happen to be on one of those side streets. I can live with this, but knowing ahead, but I think it's important that the public know that there will be a road closure on Quaker Road for this new schedule.
And also Old Dock Road from 7:40 to 8:15, so that's 35 minutes. And then Chappaquay Road just would be restricted from 7:40 to 8:40. I thought it was rather intriguing the way they did this. I mean, they're assuming that these people that, oh, there you are, that are really going to be on time and have a lot of energy that morning and make these time frames. I thought it was a lot better than the plan from the last time, where they, use half of the road for that whole long distance. It seems like a much better plan to me, doesn't it to you?
Yeah, it seems like a good plan. Is the applicant here,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, so I
Yeah.
might be able to ask a couple of
If
questions?
you'd like, yes.
Is that all right?
Great.
Through you? Hi, how are you? I noticed that you're going to try to put up some signage to notify the neighbors. Can you try to do that a week in advance? Because a lot of those folks might only be here on weekends. So if you put it up 2 days before, they might get down Friday night and not see it for Saturday. So they can make their plans the following weekend.
Sure.
Say 7 days.
Pardon me? 7 days. I'm just trying to make sure that it's 7 days.
Sure.
The other thing is, I'm willing to go with this and try it. We'll see what the backlash is as we move forward.
I have a question. I want to know how the baby is.
There are 2 now,
How old
actually.
now? 2?
Well, I have one 3-year-old and I have an 18-month-old.
18 months?
2
Because I
girls.
remember we were talking on the phone and you delivered the next day.
The next day.
That was 2 years ago?
That's right,
Wow,
yeah.
okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Is this your first time to have this half marathon in Falmouth?
It's not. We had it last year with a different route.
And what were the complications or anything that happened? You changed the route for what reason?
I don't believe that there were any, that the town council got any, the Board of Selectmen got any negative feedback from the community. The reason I changed the route was because we were crossing over 28A a couple times because we'd been asked not to use the bikeway. And my road crew, my operations staff felt that if we had any more runners, and even the plan we had last year, was a little dicey with traffic and runners. So we felt like it would be safer, in other words, to use the bike path and not cross 28A.
I will make a note that last year, your plan did change at the end, and you did do a road closing that the board wasn't aware of. And there was some feedback that I received because folks didn't think there was going to be a road closing because you needed to extend it. You went up to the church and came back. So there was some feedback, negative feedback. The reason I'm saying this is, we're going to do a road closing, but we need to make sure those folks are aware so they can adjust their schedule. They're taxpayers and they deserve to be able to know, I can't get out that morning, or I need to get out a little bit earlier, okay?
And we welcome your input on what you think would be most useful, things like, making sure we have the signs up 7 days in advance, those kind of things. We also want everyone to like our event and want us to come back. And so anything we can do to make it more amenable to folks who are living in that area, we are absolutely willing to do.
I think it's a situation in Falmouth that there's just more road races and more road races. And as residents, we are continuously paying attention to what roads we can use on certain days. And when it's on the weekend, and we have so many more visitors that come to town, it really, it's in a social situation, there's a lot of discussion about how many times we as residents need to stop because someone is using our roads and we can't keep our. So I just asked that, and I also noticed that it's for women over 37, or the average age is 37?
The average age is 37.
And they're basically staying in Falmouth for the weekend, or they come in just for this race and then they leave?
We have, I think 200-something room nights at the Seacrest. That's our host. So quite a few of the women are coming in town. Many of them are coming and staying in more than, it's a girlfriend's getaway. So they're bringing their friends in. I'm sure there are a lot of residents from Falmouth who are also participating. So they're, of course, not staying here. They live here.
What's your scene plan on the bike path? There's the idea that you're going to cone it and have them running on one side. Are they going to be running on the correct side of the traffic? I mean, how do you see them, and the bikers? Because you're not envisioning we're closing the bike path from bikers at the time. So how are they going to commingle, just the way they normally do?
I think so. We're only running in one direction on the bike path at a time, and so I imagine that most of the time they'll sort of gravitate to the right because that's just people's natural inclination. And if a biker is coming at them or needs to come around them, it'll just kind of be handled as it normally is on any weekend or any day, for that matter.
Is this an actual race for time, or is this just an enjoyment of running?
It is for time. The women are timed.
So people really would not stay in line on the bike path because they would want to pass if they could go faster.
Yes.
So you really would have several people across, one going one direction if it's for time, because they would want to go faster. That's another issue. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I forgot what I was gonna, well, the other thing I wanted to say too is that it's early in the morning. And I know a lot of the activity on the bike path doesn't always start until sometimes a little bit later on Saturday mornings. So I think the fact that it's so early, it does help to benefit the amount of traffic.
They are expecting almost a 50% increase in size.
Yeah. It's a great event, though, truly.
Thank you.
I think the board has already approved the race, that we're just revising the route.
Revising the plan.
So I make a motion to approve, just to want you to know the eyes of Falmouth are applying you.
All right, we have a motion to approve the revised route. We have a second. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Thank you.
opposition? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Moffett, you held number 3?
Yes, it's, the first thing about it is the rubber ducky race is on the Saturday before the road race, and it's going to be out at Old Silver Beach. I just thought there were an awfully lot of things about that I just think it's a very congested weekend. I think using Old Silver Beach River, I don't know if anyone else felt that same way about it, but I look at a lot of congestion, and we already have congestion because of the road race that weekend.
And if I can make a comment, I think that even the police department recommended, probably Doug wants to read that in, recommended against that. Maybe we could suggest the applicant do the Saturday after Labor Day for this event because the weather's still good and things of that nature. They said they'd be willing in their application to look at other dates, so.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I was glad that Becky held it because, and it's over on the riverside too. I mean, I don't think wouldn't it be across the road?
Yep.
Somehow I can't find that application for some reason. It got out of sync here.
The police department did say that they would recommend that the organizers consider a different location or a different date, as finding parking for the participants could be exceptionally challenging at Old Silver Beach on a Saturday morning in August.
Yeah. Don Hoffer also says that it goes against our beach policy rules to have it during the event they're asking. He doesn't guarantee there are going to be any spots available for them to go at that time.
For it to even park.
Right, and that's why the week after Labor Day would be outside of our beach policy
Right.
rules, and at 9 a.m., it really wouldn't interfere with a lot of folks.
But I think we have another one on that same, the week after, as we go. I think there's another one we're looking at for that date, another race.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that they don't say how many people will be there or how many vehicles. And I think we need to have some sort of an idea of how many people are going to participate in this. So we know, even if it's, if it's after Labor Day, it probably doesn't matter, unless it's a really beautiful day the weekend after Labor Day or something, and a lot of people are there. But we need to have some idea of how many people are going to be involved in this, and how many cars.
I don't know if anyone's ever seen one of these, but they're quite interesting.
Really?
You buy
Oh, yeah.
the duck, and they dump them all in at the same time, and the one that finishes first wins the prize, basically. And it's kind of interesting. It's for a local group, the Falmouth Figure Skating.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try it. It's a novel fundraiser, as long as we don't interfere with the beaches and the folks that are here. 9 a.m. in the morning, in the summer might be a tough time, but the weekend after Labor Day might not. I don't even know if they're going to want that date, but I think that might be a suggestion for us, and they'd have time to come back to see whether or not they wanted it.
So do we want to?
Just to add to that, excuse me, one that we did not hold is the Village Green Surf Drive Beach House road race, and that's at 9.
Yeah, but this isn't a race, Becky. They're just dropping a bunch of ducks in the water, but they're going to be there.
Well, don't do it
though.
on Surf Drive Beach House.
Okay. You need a river. That's one thing you do need.
Because you need
So-
flow.
Well, you can do Wood Neck, I guess, or something.
They have in their application asked for August 10. Their rain date was August 17th. The letter did say that they would, if the board feels that the time or location not appropriate, hoping that this event is something you might consider for another time, perhaps Labor Day weekend. Perhaps we don't need to take action on it. We could send it back to them and say, listen, we love the idea, but if you can find another location or another date that doesn't conflict with our policy.
As long as we give them the policy, I think that'd be key.
Okay, that's good.
So, Mr. Suso, if you could just make a note of that. We won't be signing that in the file. Let's see, next down the list.
Legal work.
Yeah, I had held number 8 here just because I wanted just wanted to make a note of it on the record, what this legal work was for.
Here's my figure skating club.
I think there was information that we maybe should have had, and we didn't when I read that.
So we had a memo here. I believe this is
This is the thing they agreed to.
We entered into a suit.
Yeah, the McGregor invoices, and it mentions in the memo here that the total exceeds the limit by $1,002.50. So it's a request to the board to pay the 2 bills in excess of that original limit. And this was in the matter of the Conservation Law Foundation versus the EPA. Yeah, this was the suit regarding the, basically the nitrogen issue.
It's a 208 wastewater issue.
Yeah. So just so everyone's aware of that and the general public as well. And I would make a motion to approve that.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Number 11, Mr. Murphy, you held that?
Yes, this is the Veterans Council, and the VFW doesn't have a representative here, And I know typically these folks put them forward. Mr. Mustafa has served as the selectman's appointment. And I do know that in the last year, there was a lot of concern from the Veterans Council about members of the Board of Selectmen not being engaged. And I have no idea whether the selectman's representative needs to be a veteran. We surely know Mr. Mustafa is someone that really served his country honorably, and we appreciate it. So I'm just trying to address the fact that this board didn't actually have a representative, and I know that folks in the Veterans Council were upset that they weren't able to engage a member of the board during that period. I would like to see, I know there's an opening in the VFW, and I don't know whether they have to be appointed by those specific councils, but, you know, we've had two relatively recent wars, and that being the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan. And it would be wonderful if we could get, even if we had to outreach, somebody on the Veterans Council that represented one of those groups. And it no way diminishes what the Veterans Council of this community has done, because if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have the wonderful events that we have, and we would not be servicing the numbers of veterans that this community currently services. So I'm just throwing out some, it was an opportune time to first of all say, incidentally on the sheet, I didn't know whether Mr. Mustafa wanted to serve again, number one, because it's really not here, it's in parentheses, and number two, whether this board could actively seek someone for this empty VFW slot that would represent someone younger from, I don't want, that's not necessarily true younger, someone that represented a veteran from one of the last two wars, meaning Iraq and Afghanistan. So I just throwing those out there to the board's discussion.
I'd like to add some, excuse me.
No, it's all right. Go ahead, please.
I would be interested in being on the Veterans Council. And it's because I looked at the list and said, there aren't any women. And I think the women need to have another woman in any discussion. I don't know the first thing about being on the Veterans Council, but I certainly have a very sincere interest in the veterans. And what has happened recently, as we follow the news, are many things to women. And some of our women veterans have not had the best of situations because they were in the service. And I think that in thinking all of that, I thought I would be interested in the position as a woman.
Okay. I have answers for all of the things. First of all, our meetings are always open. You are welcome to attend anytime you want, and that would kill two birds with one stone. Number one, would have a woman there, and number two, you would represent the sitting board. So that was the thing. And that was one of the problems that came up, is that we were looking for, not because I was the so-called representative of the board. I was the last selectman here and on the Veterans Council. So you people maintain the fact that I would be your representative. You could change that any time you want. But the thing is, what we were looking for is an active sitting selectman to attend our meetings once in a while. That was the thing that came up, Kevin, on that. As far as it goes, the way it's set up is that the Elks submits from the past exalted ruler a member of that organization who is a veteran to represent them, okay? And that's basically a rubber stamp operation. The VFW would submit a name of a veteran, and that would again be a rubber stamp operation. The AMVETS has a member who is a veteran, again, a rubber stamp operation. The organizations, the DAV has a member, again, a rubber stamp, and then we have the American Legion, a member of the American Legion. The veterans, the selectman's representative can be anybody you people choose to be your representative on the council. So it doesn't have to be me. It just happens that over the years, I was the only veteran on the select board, so I was the representative. If you want to change that, that's your prerogative. You can do whatever you want. I'm a member of the VFW, I'm a member of the AMVETS, I'm a member of the Elks, I'm everything except the American Legion. So if worse came to worse, I could get the commander of one of those organizations rather, to recommend me for the position. So if you want to be the selectman's representative to the council, that's your decision. The 5 of you make that decision.
I don't have to be a veteran.
That is another reason I held this, Mr. Mustafa. There is no recommendation here for the VFW. Is that organization active, inactive?
They're inactive right now, and the commander of that organization, the acting commander, is Andy Dufresne. I believe he would like to stay on the council. He has had a long history with the council and with Veterans Affairs, and I really believe that he would like to stay. He did hit a point there where he's a little upset about things, the way they were going. Nothing is perfect in life. We all get upset on things that happen. But I believe that Andy would like to stay. The members that we have right now, I don't personally have a problem with if you people would so desire to keep all of us on there. And like I say, you're welcome to come to every one of our meetings anytime you want, if that's your choice. It is your choice. You have the ball in your court, so whichever way you want to throw it is fine with us. We just work, for the care and protection of the veterans in the town.
As you said, for 5 of these, it's a rubber stamp, but we have to have a name to rubber stamp. I mean,
Right.
We can't appoint Andy to the VFW representative without him putting his name forward.
Exactly.
Or him putting your name in and then give a shot for Rebecca.
I think that was probably an oversight on their part, that they didn't get something from the VFW.
And is there a way that we can reach out to him to?
Yes, as a matter of fact, tomorrow I will make a point to get downstairs and talk to Don Lincoln and Julie and get that straightened out and get something up to Mr. Suso's office immediately. So, like I say, if you want to put this on hold,
I would
it's up
prefer
to
to put it
you.
on hold so we can appoint the entire committee and know.
Right, and the other thing is you have an opportunity here.
Yeah.
Mrs. Moffett wants to participate, but she wants to vote at the table, so it sounded like, so that's going to be up to your group.
She can be your non-veteran representative to the thing. She could take my position, and you would have to be the MC at the ceremonies, because I'm not going to be there.
Make sure all
Why,
of you vote.
but you're not going anywhere.
I'll be in the background someplace.
No, we'll
that's
get
all.
you on the VFW spot.
No, that's Andy's. That's Andy's slot. I don't want to take Andy's slot.
Okay.
But anyways, if you
find that out
want to put it on hold until next time.
Okay, in that same spirit, maybe if it would be helpful, I could ask for any additional input from town council. The reason I say that is that I have been in places where there is there are other methods of appointment. I think you are not strictly limited under the statute to how you want to proceed. With total respect for this process, no problem, but I think you may have some additional latitude beyond that you might want to consider, but I would want to run that by Frank if that would be your pleasure.
I think that'd be great. In other words, if we could add even
Yes,
to
that's
the
what I'm talking
group,
about.
you know, one or two, or specifically, again,
Right.
the
Honoring what's
representatives
here.
of new awards.
But potentially giving you that
Okay.
opportunity as well. Be happy to do that.
All right, so we'll table this for now, or take it up at the next meeting?
And I will go down there tomorrow morning and see them, and we'll get that VFW one straightened out. Okay? And
Thank
welcome
you.
aboard.
Mr. Chairman,
Not
can I
there
make a
yet.
comment to
Yes.
Mr. Mustafa while he's here? Ahmed, I just happen to know that our veterans staff members are at a training session tomorrow, so
Oh.
they're not going to be in the office just for one day.
Okay.
So I'd pass it on and save you a trip into,
Good, I'll catch
they'll
them
be in on Wednesday,
I'll catch them Wednesday.
but yeah, Don had spoken to me about that.
Okay.
So I'm trying to save you a trip. Wednesday's a better day.
Okay, that's good.
Yep, pardon me. Sure.
All right,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
you're welcome. And finally, item number 12, Mr. Jones.
I just am not supportive of the collecting money on the street of any organization, and I just cannot vote for the entire packet if it included that.
I agree with that. I noticed in other towns that are doing this collection, that they're taking a fire engine into a space at a supermarket. This was noticed along the South Shore, and the firefighters are there, and the boots are out, and people are coming. But I think the idea that the firefighters stand in the street on that corner, I believe there's another way, because it's an important fundraiser for them, very important. But I do not believe in the standing in the street.
And just as an aside, I did notice there was a group during the car wash at the Murray McDonald standing in the street with their sign and collecting money from cars as they went by also. And I worry that we have set that as being, that's okay to do. And, you know, to have the teenage girls out there with their cans troubled me greatly.
I thought that at a previous discussion, because we had the Marines, was it the Marines who were doing that too? That we asked them to reconsider doing this and finding some other way to raise funds. This is also road race weekend on Saturday when the traffic is just crazy. So maybe we could ask them to reconsider either another date or another venue.
And I would tend to, I didn't even really realize the date. I think you're exactly right. And I understand where you're coming from, Doug. You brought it up a couple of times. But maybe if we go the weekend after the date, and the 17th instead of the 10th, and then let them know that we'd prefer to do something like Becky has talked about in the future, that we don't basically block the roads doing this, that, you know, we give them an opportunity to succeed this year, and then, you know, come up with another alternative next year. I don't know what you thought. It'd be a great thing to put down at the finish at the road race. They could park the fire truck right down there and give public safety at the same time.
Hope the runners are carrying some money with them.
Probably not.
It's really dangerous.
I think it's
It
very
really
dangerous.
is.
I think it's very, very dangerous to allow anyone to go out into a street to collect money.
So, are we going to approve this and ask them to consider something else next year and discontinue the practice? Or do we want to simply ask them to, I mean, it's awfully short notice to basically drop it. They've made this request annually, obviously, and for us to, you know, just before asking for this again, to say, no, we're not going to do it this time, do we want to at least give them fair warning and say, we'll approve it this one last time, but perhaps develop a policy? And
Well, I thought we said that we're going to ask them to move it to the following weekend, so that it wasn't on road race weekend, and then ask them to consider another way of doing it, to approve it, but approve it for the following week, if they can do it. I mean, I don't know what they...
I will not vote to approve it.
how does the board want to proceed?
I make a motion that we approve it for the 17th of August, and then as part of the motion that we ask them to consider alternatives next year that is not in the road.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition?
Opposed?
The motion carries 3-2. And that brings us to the end of the summary of actions. Do we have any reports from the individual members of the board?
I have one report for the board. If the board remembers correctly, last fall, when the Falmouth Road Race came before the Board of Selectmen for their permit, they were looking to increase the size, and there were some comments from this board about potentially looking to change the date of the Falmouth Road Race to not in the middle of the meat of the summer. So after that meeting, I had spoken to their chairman of their board of directors, Mr. Gelfi, and he was working to get me, as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, on one of their agendas. I was finally able to do that later in the spring when they had an opportunity to do that. I wanted the board to know that the Falmouth Road Race Committee voted last week to change next year, not this year, just so everyone knows, it's not this year, but next year, to change the Falmouth Road Race to the third Sunday in the month of August. So that was the original date years ago for the Falmouth Road Race. The date got moved back, and they had an open mind in looking at it, and they understood the concerns of the Board of Selectmen. I think they also understood the concerns of the business community, that this was as busy a time of the year as could be anyways, and that it would be very good that everybody could benefit by changing the date. They did so, and next year it will be on the third Sunday in the month of August.
August 16th.
Well, I don't have the calendar. Is that the date? Okay. August 16 next year.
17, sorry. 17.
I just want to make a comment, and it's not a criticism. It's just, while we're talking about trying to put into place process and procedures, like with email and all of this, when I was on the, I've been on the board, as you know, a long time, but in previous years, the way we used to do it, if we had a discussion about something, and the consensus from the group, or even a vote from the board, was to do some follow-up, and we wanted a particular individual on the board to do that follow-up. We designated that person as the person to do the follow-up, and then they would report back to the board. You know, I think, Kevin, it's not a criticism of you, but I think going forward, if we want someone to do that, we should formally designate that person to be the representative to the board of that group, committee, board, whatever it is, and then report back, because all of us got blindsided by that, with all the calls and the emails we got about, what is this? The road race, the Board of Selectmen is changing the date of the road race, and people thought it was this year, and we had calls from journalists and reporters and people. It was like crazy, and none of us, I didn't know anything about it.
Well,
So-
I even got the same calls that folks thought that it was this year.
Yeah.
And
Well, I called the road race, and then they told me that you had had a meeting with them at the discussion. So I think, and that's okay, but I think in the future, it's a good thing for the board to designate somebody to be that representative of the board, and then the person comes back and says they did meet with them, and this is the proposal, and so what do you think about that? That's the way we used to do it back in the 90s, and it worked really well. So, because it keeps communication, everybody knows what's going on.
well, there really wasn't anything to communicate until the month of June, because
Well, no,
they
but-
kept putting us on the agenda and saying,
Yeah, but
oh,
at least you could say, I'm working with them, and this is when they're considering it, and this is what we're planning, and is the following weekend a good thing? Is that something the board would agree with? And because it was that way forever, it used to be the third weekend. and
But I actually thought the third weekend is what we, as a board last year, were looking at. And
We were looking at another weekend, yeah.
Yeah, we had
But then-
suggested that.
But we didn't know about it until we got all these calls. And then people thought it was this time, and people were freaking out, runners. What do you mean you're changing the date for the road race? You know, isn't it going to be in 2 weeks? And
Well, I do have to say that the road race committee was very nervous about addressing it, and they polled their runners.
They said,
And it
yeah.
was well over 80% who said they would run the race if it was the next weekend anyways. So they were quite happy with it.
It just reminded
Yep.
me of some protocol
Sounds
that
good.
I thought worked really well in previous years, that we
And
might want
noted,
to.
yeah, we probably should try to make sure
Yeah,
we
so we know that
establish these
somebody's
protocols.
doing, representing the board like that. So, because we don't have any power authority on our own anyway, we can't do anything.
Correct.
But if the board designates you to be their representative, then you have a little bit of standing to be able to do that. Right, Ahmed, you were there when we did things like that.
All right, any additional reports from the board?
Well, I reported on Mary Lou Smith, which I know what an incredible person she was, truly. And I mentioned about the the nitrogen bylaw that the commission, Cape Cod Commission is taking up. And
The wastewater collaboration in Hyannis, that I went to a meeting there, and they were in different regions of the Cape, and so I probably had my first official meeting.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to test me on what I learned? Don't you dare say yes.
No, we'll give you a break.
You're going to be pleased I'm on it.
All right, if there are no further reports.
No.
Yeah, town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one item. As the board is aware, the Mass Department of Public Health has confirmed the West Nile virus has been detected in a mosquito collected at a sampling location off Woods Hole Road. That on Tuesday, July 23rd passed. I had forwarded to the board a copy of the press release by the Health Department on this matter, and that press release is on the town website under the Department of Public, under the Board of Health, and any resident can review that. It does have some suggestions for precautions that should be taken to avoid potential exposure. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, could I just maybe say one report? I was invited to attend the Board of Selectmen meeting last week, and only to talk about the charter review that the county is undergoing. And Mr. Anderson, I can't think of his first name, who's the Assembly of Delegate member from Bourne, was there too. So the two of us made a presentation together for about 40 minutes, and it went really well. And the board gave us some very good feedback, and I think some of the other commissioners and delegates are going around the Cape. So if any of you think you might like to have a brief presentation from your delegate, Julie Taylor, and me, we'd be happy to do that. So you have an idea of what's going on at the county level, because there's a lot of misinformation going on around it. So just...
Is there an interest in that? Do we want to bring everyone
15
in?
minutes is all it takes.
I think it does make sense for us to know about the charter review.
Do we want to have we could also bring in our representative to the Cape Cod Commission and ask for a county-wide update?
Just an update.
All right, we'll look to plan that.
See,
for
you're really
future
excited
date.
about this at 11 o'clock. How do you get excited about it?
Don't everyone jump up at
That's
once?
all right. You're not hurting my
I
feelings.
was just going to say, I think I've read about hundreds of pages about that.
Don't send a big report.
Yeah.
Don't fall asleep with me.
Brevity is the soul of wit.
All right. I think we've covered the agenda. A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Nestled in a classic New England setting amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.